team. For us, it's really great to see and also to experience that this third masterclass is conducted as planned, also in a virtual online format. But when we conducted the second masterclass, it was for us a pilot, or let's say a test case, as it was the first intervention that we had conducted by virtual means. But your feedback that you provided also during the evaluation period and in this evaluation survey proved us right, in the sense that you were also apparently quite happy with the content and the discussion we had during the second masterclass. So we are happy to continue this way. We are happy also to have, as Arjan mentioned, great speakers and guests today in this masterclass. And as Arjan also mentioned, the focus of today's and also tomorrow's session is on the entrepreneurial ecosystem, with a specific focus, of course, on Albania, but we are also here to learn from the experiences in the Netherlands. But to start or to kick off with our guests, or I would even say friends from the Albanian ecosystem, I would like to introduce to you the following guest speakers. First of all, we have the municipality of Tirana, and the municipality is represented by Joni Baboci, and Joni is welcome Joni. Joni is General Director of Planning and Urban Development, and he will give us a short overview of ongoing and also planned activities of the municipality in the area of entrepreneurship and startup promotion. And if I'm not mistaken, Joni, you will especially focus on the Pyramid project, right? So,
yes, I will give a very brief presentation on the pyramid.
Okay, perfect. So I would like to hand over to you, Joni. You have prepared a presentation, so please share your screen with us so that we can all follow you. Thank you.
Hello. Can you see the presentation? Can you see the slide?
Yes, we can see the presentation and hear your voice.
Perfect.
Yes, we can see.
Awesome. I will maybe start right away. So hello, everyone, and very, very happy to be here and to talk briefly about our projects in this sector, which is extremely interesting to us as a city, but also to me individually. Very briefly, before I speak about the pyramid projects, I would like to just give a brief number of ideas that I have in the field. I think that it's very, very important that of course, when we talk about tech hubs and when we talk about innovation and startups, I think it's important to underline the important role that state and government and local government actors play in this process. One of my favorite writers on this field, Mariana Mazzucato, an economist and the author of a very controversial book called The Entrepreneurial State, speaks about how the role of government is so important in actually driving innovation. And often the private sector takes the last and the least risky step in the technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship process. One beautiful example she gives, which I've always enjoyed, is Apple and the iPhone. There's 12 different indispensable technologies developed by publicly funded research, which then leads to the iPhone. From the internet to Siri, all of these were developed by public research and public funded research. And then, of course, that led to the amazing innovation that we today, all of us basically use. So, of course, in Albania, we don't aspire, and maybe we are not able to deliver that kind of support. But I think it's important for everyone to always keep that in mind. The second thing I would want to touch upon is the importance of what I call location and co-location. We've had the internet around us for almost 30 years. And while a lot of low-skilled jobs are mostly physical, you need to be there, they're being outsourced all the time. We see now the Ubers and the baboons here in Albania. The knowledge economy still revolves around urban hubs. So Silicon Valley hasn't moved out of Silicon Valley yet. Maybe the coronavirus crisis we're currently going through will change that, although I'm very, very doubtful as a big fan of Steve. But sorry, can you guys hear me? I'm hearing a lot of feedback.
Can hear you very well.
Perfect. So I think that
it should be interesting if you could speak a little slower, because some of the words are missing during.
I will. I'm sorry. And so again, as an interesting example in the importance of location, I would just want to give a brief example of Silicon Valley itself. Before it was the current tech hub, it was a research center for radar, for radio, for headsets, for all kinds of technologies, which, while not directly connected to the current technologies we see, in a way created a backbone of infrastructure, of a backbone of knowledge, of the importance of universities. And I'm very happy that we have so many universities here today represented, which collaborated in creating this after the Second World War, when the world moved beyond radar to tech and to technology. So I think that pipeline of young engineers and young creatives streaming from the university to the startup space is key in driving innovation. The last point I want to make before briefly presenting the pyramid is how can we use cities as a platform for civilization, for humanity? I think that innovation at its core, it's people. And the big challenge we have in Albania is actually keeping people here and getting people involved and supporting them in these fantastic processes. So I hope that through the pyramid, which I will briefly talk a bit now, we are able to create a hotspot where this kind of innovation can work. As a lot of you know, as most of you know, this building was built as the mausoleum of the dictator, the mausoleum of Enver Hoxha, the place where his ashes would rest, his final resting place. And then it slowly, it sort of evolved very informally, like most of the city of Tirana, into an important center, but a center which for decades had been left untouched with no clear program to what would happen with it. We are very, very happy to have presented this project of the TUMO Center, the pyramid, as a knowledge and innovation hub, almost 1.5 years ago. We are very, very close to starting actual work and breaking ground with the new building. We have partnered with TUMO, which is a Center for Creative Technologies. It first started in Armenia by a number of tech innovators from Silicon Valley. The concept there is to have the ability for young people, younger than university students. So we're talking about people up to 17 years old. So when they go into university, they have animation skills, game development, filmmaking, web design, music, writing, drawing, graphics, programming. They have the soft skills necessary to then apply them to whatever their field of interest is during university. And so therefore, we want to use this as a platform to launch people through university education into a future of technology and innovation. And basically, we want to really, really transform this building. We want to keep the shell, but transform the building radically into a tech hub where we would have 1/3 of it would be public space, devolved to libraries, to galleries, to co-working spaces, financed by the public sector. 1/3 of it would be the TUMO Center. So again, a publicly supported but self-sustained education and knowledge center for young adults. And then the third stop would be, of course, private space for startups to be able to rent space in this center inside at a very low and moderate price. And therefore have all of these three elements together in one building in the center of the boulevard in Tirana, in a historic, interesting building with these three different uses and I think interesting innovations. We want to use this in a way as a cross-pollinator. We have a big public plaza in the center where we hope that knowledge and young people and the private sector with a lot of startups and again, the publicly supported spaces can come together and can maybe help Tirana move forward in this space, which as we all know is so important and so crucial to moving things forward. I will keep it short. I was asked to keep it short, but I'm more than happy to participate and to answer any questions if there are any now or later on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joni. Yeah, I mean, back to you. If there are any questions for Joni right now, please let us know via the chat function. Okay, there's already one from Erik. I cannot see if it's Erik Boer or Erik Stam. How does the city of Tirana see the role of universities in this project?
It's my question, Erik Boer.
Okay. Joni, you want to answer that one?
I'm sorry, I was just now, for some reason, when I moved from the presentation, I didn't hear anything.
Okay, the question is, how does the city of Tirana see the role of universities in this project? It's a question coming from Erik Boer from AC.
I mean, I think that the main, that's the key driver of, I think, most important things in cities, not just innovation. So that young generation that comes out of universities, they come with the passion, the lack of agendas, and the clarity of vision to change things. I've been working in this country now for almost 10 years, and I lack that. I feel that I lack that kind of drive that I had 10 years ago. So I think it's key how they can become partners with us. I think that it's extremely interesting to explore how a part of the public area or a part of the startup area or even the part of the TUMO area could be thought of as a knowledge collaboration with universities. How can we drive young students, maybe underprivileged, who will come to the pyramid and learn these interesting soft skills to the right universities, to the right fields of interest? I think it's extremely important to have high school kids and give them a vision which goes beyond the programming or beyond the creative aspects of it. And I think we can serve as a connector through the pyramid, which again, very key for us. It's not our space. We will build it, but it will not be managed by us. We will support it. We will support students actually. So if a student is underprivileged, we will make sure that we can pay his fees. But the building itself will be a self-sustained, independent entity out of the reach of City Hall. And the reason why we want that, of course, is so it's independent, is so that it can sort of work as an independent factory of ideas. And I think that the connection that could be made there, we are not clear yet, but we are more than open to see how that evolves in the coming years. We want to start TUMO earlier, so we hope by September we already will have TUMO started in Tirana, not at the pyramid, at another center close to the boulevard. And then by the time we finish work in 1.5 years at the pyramid, hopefully we will be able to move things in and have everyone together there. And throughout this time, we are more than happy to think together about how we could make universities part of this process of transition from young adults to the future of careers, of innovative careers.
Okay, thank you very much, Joni, for this answer. Okay, there's another one coming from Ilona. Another question. You can also see it in the chat function, Joni.
Maybe I can say it out loud. Hello, Joni. Thank you for the presentation. Maybe if it helps, I can just spell it out in words.
Please do.
I very much appreciated the fact that you see a role for the public institutions to play into promoting innovation. I also believe institutions do play a role. However, considering that the R&D share of the GDP in 2020's budget for Albania, it's 0.03%. It's peanuts. It's basically nothing. And then hearing your comparison to the Silicon Valley, it seemed a bit too far stretched for me. And I think we very often tend to see successful models and try to import them or learn from them, but show little regard to our local context. Mm-hmm. So yeah, what's your thinking about that?
Yes, so I never meant to compare Tirana to Silicon Valley, of course. I think I just wanted to illustrate the importance that the public sector can and does have. Again, one beautiful quote from that book is that if the rest of the world wants to emulate the US model, they should do as the US did, not as they say they did today. I think you know, the difference between government and a startup is exactly what you described. a startup has the chance and has the potential to move things very, very quickly towards whatever the future is. A government is like, I think, in a way, an inefficient corporation. So it's even worse than a huge monster with hundreds or thousands of people involved, with hundreds of agendas, with a very, very ingrained inertia. It's very hard to move, as you said. I mean, it's a pity. What can I say about the 0.03% government for research and development? I can only support and hope that it will come up into the future. But if startups wait for that to happen, they will not be successful. People who are successful, they will just move out of the country and find something else. So I think that in the current conditions, in the current context, all the actors, both in government, local government, multilateral corporations or institutions, universities, need to find a working context where they can collaborate. We hope the Pyramid is a platform that can bring those ideas and those concepts together. And we really hope that, we can have an impact beyond the city itself. If we can, in a way, push the government towards increasing the budget for R&D, let's say, or for driving budget towards a specific area of R&D in universities, that would be awesome. On the other hand, I don't like the defeatist attitude where, what do we do? I think the whole concept of innovation is bootstrapping, is doing amazing things with very, very little little resources. And I think that, of course, people can choose to just leave, but those who can't and those who have a reason not to, like me, like all of you who are here in this call, maybe can find the way to improve things slowly and steadily and incrementally. We don't expect the government or the local government or the authorities to just move from 0.03% to 5%. But I think we can all contribute to pushing these agendas forward. Again, it's the opposite of having a startup. It's the direct opposite. So I think it's important for people maybe to also try this after, again, almost a decade in the public sector. I'm really tired of it for the reasons that you just mentioned. But at the same time, I think that the opportunities that are there for young people to try and push these agendas forward don't need to be discounted. And I think it's important to keep an open mind and a positive attitude toward trying to really hold on to the possibility and the potential that our small but important city has in the sector and in the region.
Okay, thank you very much, Yoni, and also Ilona for the question. So we have jumped right into the discussion, which is great, but looking at the time, I would propose to continue with the other guest speakers that we have today. And the next one is actually Kuştrim Shala. Welcome, Kuştrim, and thank you very much also for joining. Kuştrim is also an important stakeholder, or is representing important institutions and ISOs of the Albanian ecosystem. Just to mention a few, Kuştrim is running the Uplift Accelerator program since last year. He's also involved in ICTS Labs and also in the annual ICT Awards. So again, thank you very much, Kuştrim. And please also, when you share with us your experiences and some more details about your interventions in the ecosystem, please also mention or share with us your ideas how universities could come on board or could be involved.
Thank you, Jacqueline. It's my pleasure being in this panel. Can you see my presentation?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Hi, everyone. To those who do not know me, I'm Kuştrim Shala. I'm coming from the industry part. My company is called ICDS Media. It is the first company I founded. First, we jumped into the media part. We were licensed from IDG, International Data Group, which is a giant in technology and innovation. For publishing media part, and then time by time we realized that by developing of the industry, we need to let's say to identify, to promote, and to reward those talented people that are operating in ICT, and we founded ICT Awards, which is the one of the biggest competition in the Albanian-speaking countries, with the main aim of finding innovators around Albania, but not only. Jumping into this discussion, that it was very interesting from Yoni and from the participants that were doing some questions regarding the comparison between Albania or other countries or other developed countries, or let's say like hubs like Silicon Valley, is that the best way of comparing with them is to attract diaspora. From what I learned during my experience with ICT Awards is that all innovators that were winners of the main prizes, and which are some of them are almost unicorns, they are coming from diaspora. So it is a very let's say distinguished fact that we should also jump our focus into diaspora, because they not only are bringing their skills and their experience that they have gained in their countries, but they will also bring their experience in Albania, and they will easily implement their ideas with a very low cost, and of course they are building it in their own home. And recently I want to mention one of the most important initiatives when it comes from the on the entrepreneurship is Uplift Albania. And thanks to many actors like EU for Innovation, Municipality of Albania, and some Municipality of Tirana, and some industry actors like telecommunication and banking, we did a very successful first batch, which was a pilot one, which was finished this year. And just as a follow-up to bring you some news, 3 of those startups, best startups that were graduated from this accelerator, has already raised 200,000 euros. And one of them, the best identified startup, is in negotiation to raise another 350,000 euros. So when it comes to the let's say importance of involving of universities having their say in accelerators and incubators, it is very important. As we know, the triple helix method, the 3 main pillars of this methodology is university, is government, and is the industry. Government is there to facilitate the market regulation. University is there to offer the infrastructure and, of course, the basics for research. And industry is for let's say for the demand of the market, because they are in touch with the customers, and they are always dealing with in upfront. What we are going to let's say to offer this year in terms of collaboration between our accelerator and universities is that we are very eager, and we are very much interested to collaborate and to start working first with some incubators, which were supposed to be inside of universities, but we will not lose the time. So we will find those incubators and co-working spaces this year to build the partnership with them. In order to diversify the services or the benefits that we are going to offer to the startups of this year. Of course, we are going to increase the possibility for financial investment with our partners in Central Europe, in Slovakia, in Czech Republic, and in Austria. But of course, we are always looking forward, and we are interested to build new partnership with, especially with venture capital around the region. Regarding the timeline of this year, we will kick off the accelerator in 4th of September and it will be not 6 weeks like was the pilot version of the first uplift, but it will be 12 weeks. So it will be very much intensive comparing to the previous one, and of course it will have a lot of add-ons in terms of collaboration with the universities. In terms of mentoring and coaches, we will of course diversify or let's say partnership, and we also try to keep those mentors which were very serious, because in Albania, as we realized, the concept of mentoring was not very much understood because of because of a lack of experience. So not all of mentors and coaches were let's say active enough to contribute in such accelerators. So we will try to also keep searching for new mentors and coaches for specific let's say skills that they are ready to share. And usually mentors are coming from industry, not very much from the university part. But with university, as I previously mentioned, it is a crucial part of implementing a successful accelerator, because of the infrastructure, of access to talent, and research basic for research. I didn't want to go very much deeply with it, so thank you very much for your attention, and I will be waiting for any kind of question you might have.
Thank you very much, Kustrim. Yeah, so are there any questions for Kustrim related to Uplift, but maybe also to the other activities and interventions that Kustrim is involved in? But Kustrim, if you agree, I mean, maybe there are also later coming up some questions after we have the next guest speaker. So if you're still willing to be around with us, so you could maybe then also answer them later. Okay, thank you. So for the next guest, I'm very happy to welcome Arjan Imeri, who runs Officina Startup Accelerator. And Arjan is not only involved in Officina, but also in many other startup and innovation related activities throughout the country. So not only focusing on Tirana. So Arjan, if you could share with us some of your insights and observations that you have regarding the ecosystem, the current status of the ecosystem in Albania and your activities. Arjan, I hope you are here in the call because I haven't seen you, to be honest.
I'm here.
Oh, perfect. Welcome, Arjan.
I'm trying to share a desktop, or at least a page of presentation. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here. While I try and present, I'm sorry, I've been used to Teams. Is the first time I'm using, so it's new for me, but I'll get the hang of it quickly. I'd like to thank, of course, EU for Innovation for inviting me here, and also the team from ACE Incubator. They're a great inspiration for us working in the environment. I know Amsterdam quite well in terms of, let's say, capacities that I have to develop. Is the 5th country or the 5th city in Europe by ranking for developing a very successful ecosystem startups, and we look forward to, not copying, but learning from them, from their best case scenarios and what they've developed together with the universities. In terms of Officina, I can say that we're the oldest accelerator incubator in Tirana, founded in 2016. From Facebook, from a grant from Facebook Foundation. We've had some very good years and some not so good ones, depending on what our capacities were. But I can say that 2019 started very well, and 2020 is progressing even better. In terms of incubation capacities, we are based in within the compound of Harry Fultz Institute. We have our own building, an old building used for developing parts for Italian army, therefore the name Officina. So we have an emotional attachment to this building. And I would like to make the presentation as relevant of university lecturers and professors as possible today. So we are going to start very soon in Shkodër an acceleration program which moves us a little bit away from Tirana, where everything seems to happen, and include and have as a partner our university, Luigi Buracucci, in Shkodër. This is the first step that we've taken, and this has been a long time coming, to involve research and academics from universities to be part of the incubation or programs that we develop or co-develop, because we see them not as a pipeline to have startups or entrepreneurs or innovators joining our programs after they leave or during university, but we see them as an essential point or a reference where, when we want to develop new technologies, when we want to develop projects that have research within, let's say, within in their progress, we want to work with universities to protect some of these intellectual property rights that are being developed but not being patented or not being trademarked or not being registered. And we see the research and development and university community as a unique point where we go and be part of a larger projects funded by EU and other organizations beyond Albania and beyond our regional. We, as Officina, we have funded in 2019 Startup Europe Network. We are together with 13 other partners, incubators, and as well as, let's say, organizations from Central Eastern Europe and Western Balkans. I can mention some huge names that do some very good work, such as Startup Poland, Austrian startups, ICK in Kosovo, which is one of our, let's say, best collaborators in this field. And through this network, we engage Startup Europe University Network. The reason why we want, again, this comes up to our, let's say, focal point of involving universities as collaborators and not just as partners. So we're not interested just to say, okay, we have partner a university, but we're interested to co-create with them, to have common workshops. We currently use a number of very well-respected professors from different faculties for University of Tirana, Agriculture University of Tirana, Epoca University, etc. So I cannot see everyone, so I hope they're here today, and I salute them. And we will be continuing to do so in the next couple of years. If I want to say something else, we have a number of engagement with universities. I won't mention, but they're all open on our website, and they all have as a backbone research and development. And I know from the previous question that Elona raised that research and development budget is very, very low. But again, there are instruments where we can cooperate and co-develop programs where we can apply and increase this budget. Because as we know, it's well and good to ask municipality or government for more money, but in these times, unfortunately, money is very short. And again, I understand their point of view when they say it's a little bit impossible for us to engage with financial intervention. But of course, just as Yoni mentioned earlier, they're building a very nice location in Tirana where we can go and participate in common projects. I don't know if I want to go on anymore. I know you have a lot of guests. And again, thank you, and thank you to everyone for listening.
Okay, thank you very much, Arjan. I mean, the last sentence were cut off for me, so I didn't hear that. But thank you for joining, and thank you very much for making time available, Arjan. So I don't see at the moment any questions coming for Arjan. So therefore, I would like to proceed introducing our next external guest, and this is Eileen Trenkman. And some of you, or maybe even quite a few of you, have met Eileen already, because Eileen is an external consultant and she supports the EU for Innovation project right from the beginning. Because she's the lead author of our so-called gap analysis, the study on the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Albania. Eileen, together with a co-author, conducted the first study in, when was it, January, February 2019. But at that time, the study had a focus on Tirana. And then we did an update of this study also to take the broader perspective and also to visit selected other cities of Albania in September 2019. So the new updated study is out now, is available also on our webpage, and it gives a very comprehensive overview of the status quo of the Albanian ecosystem. And Eileen will share a few of these insights that she gained through this study afterwards, after the insights or the input from Erik Stam. So basically that was just a teaser. So hi Eileen, thank you for joining and being with us today.
Hi, also from my side.
And looking forward to your input, of course, later on. Okay, so that's all from my side. For now, I would like to hand over now to Erik Boer. It's a bit difficult today because we have two Eriks and two Arjans, right? So this time to Erik Boer, then to introduce the other guest speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline, for introducing all the great speakers that we had in the first half an hour, and also very nice to see and hear all the people that are already familiar to us in this other masterclass, unfortunately online, but happy to continue, like we said before. And it's also very nice to have people from, let's say, the broader ecosystem on board and listen to their stories. And it's also the purpose of this masterclass to look a little bit wider than the university itself and see how we can get connected to the outside world when it comes to entrepreneurship and innovation. My role now is to introduce the first keynote of the afternoon, which is Erik Stam. Erik Stam is a professor of the University of Utrecht. He is a professor in strategy, organization, and last but not least, entrepreneurship. He is the founder of the Utrecht Center for Entrepreneurship University, a well-known university entrepreneurship center in the Netherlands. He's also the Dean of Economics of the School of Economics. He's a research fellow at the German Institute for Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises in Bonn. So, I mean, I think this sums up that he is a great scholar when it comes to entrepreneurship innovation. He is in many advisory boards and he's a speaker. He advises the government on issues around the Dutch ecosystem and how we can stimulate more entrepreneurship in the country. So Erik is really a great expert in the field in our country, and that's why we are very, very happy that he can take the time to join us today and deliver a keynote on entrepreneurial ecosystems. So Erik, from Erik to Erik, Erik, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Erik. We'll keep it in the Erik sphere. Thank you very much also for the broader organization for inviting me. It's really great to contribute to this ecosystem thinking and doing. It's a pity that I can't be in Tirana. I would have loved to join you there. The good news is that we had some very good students from Albania here at Utrecht University. So I happen to know a bit about that. And I'm also very happy to have been educating them. And that's also, I guess, part of the diaspora. So I also hope they get back to Albania and make good connections with Utrecht and Tirana and the Netherlands and Albania at large. I'll share my presentation with you. To get into presentation mode, let's see where it is. I hope you can all see this.
Yes.
Great. Unfortunately, I don't have the chat function because for some reason I'm out of the team. So I would ask someone else, someone else to keep track of the chat function, because I would like to make it as interactive as possible. So please If someone wants to ask a question, shout, because raising your hand or see the chat wouldn't work with me. I was asked to give a particular view on the role of universities in entrepreneurial ecosystems, and that's interesting in itself, but also I've been involved, as Erik Boer said, in the Utrecht Center for Entrepreneurship itself. With some irony, I always say that the Utrecht University perhaps used to be the least entrepreneurial university of the Netherlands, so the only way is up, and I think we've managed to get it up to some degree over the last decade. I'm not involved in that too much anymore because I'm now Dean of the School of Economics, but I think the overall role of universities has changed over the last 2 to 3 decades as from a marginal player in the economy or an indirect player in the economy into a much more proactive player. And I think one of the, let's say, frameworks to really make this proactive role work is an entrepreneurial ecosystem framework. And I think it was good to listen to the previous presentations as well, because there's this sort of misguided idea that we should all copy Silicon Valley, which on the one hand takes about 80 years. So that's a long-term strategy, but more importantly, it's a ridiculous strategy because every region has its own strengths and weaknesses, and we should have a framework that enables us to improve every economy. And the good thing, or at least that is what I would argue, is that the entrepreneurial ecosystem approach is a framework to improve every economy. It is a generic framework that enables us to look at the world, to look at your own back garden, and to use the insights from science on how economic development comes about, what is the role of entrepreneurship, but also to provide a sort of a microscope to look at your own region and to see, well, what are the weakest link in my region, and to what degree does it make sense to focus on that or that element in what sequence, and how can I involve stakeholders, most importantly entrepreneurs themselves, to improve our region. So it is really I would say, a framework for improving your economy. And I'm telling this now because let's say 100 years ago, when we were an agricultural economy or industrial economy or a communist society, this would not be that prominent. But now we have realized more and more that if we want to create value, welfare in the future, entrepreneurship is a very important mechanism to do so. I've asked you some questions in advance, and thank you also very much for answering those. I hope to answer those with my short introductory lecture, but I hope to answer them even more so in a discussion or a conversation with you to see how we can learn from each other and instigate a process of collective learning to improve entrepreneurial ecosystems around the world. Of course, my main knowledge is from, let's say, the Western European context. I've been doing this kind of stuff in the Netherlands, but also in the UK, but also have been involved quite intensively in emerging economies, for example, the Kurdistan region of Iraq, many parts of Europe, and also the Middle East and Northern Africa. There are two main elements of my presentation today. I will introduce you to the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Framework. It's a framework of thinking and doing. It's a framework for improving the economy. And I will particularly focus on the roles of universities in entrepreneurial ecosystems. First of all, I think this is a framework about something we all care for. So we all, I think we are involved in science, in entrepreneurship, in policy making. Our daily life is ultimately to improve human flourishing, aggregate value creation, to say it in technical terms, to increase well-being, employment, in more technical terms, productivity, income. And of course, this is not a new question. You have The Wealth of Nations, probably one of the first economics books in the world in 1776, which was about the question, how can we improve the wealth of nations? We have many other scholars in economics and social sciences to gain insight how we can increase wealth. Entrepreneurship has been an important part of this. Already a century ago, there was Joseph Schumpeter, I think the founding father of innovation economics. Also, if you read Mariana Mazzucato's work, which some of you have done, I realize she also gets back to the work of Joseph Schumpeter, the essential role of entrepreneurship in economic development. But if you go back to Mesopotamia, you can already see about or read about the role of entrepreneurs. So that in itself is not a new issue. But entrepreneurship, as I would argue, has become more and more prominent as a driver of economic development over the last 2 to 3 decades. And the question is, what can we do about this? Well, many of you will see these faces. It's a pity that I don't see your faces now, but at least we are looking at the same faces. If I would ask students, well, what do you, who are the entrepreneurs that you fancy or that you appreciate? Well, they would perhaps say Elon Musk, but some might say Sergey Brin and Larry Page from Google, students from Stanford University. If you're from Berlin, you would perhaps mention the founders of Zalando. If you're from Stockholm, you would mention the founders of Spotify. If you're from the Netherlands, well, if you're somewhat older from the Netherlands, you would mention the founders of TomTom, the leading global or navigation device company, which is now much more into autonomous vehicles. But there's the realization that we need those people to create welfare for the future, and that it is not just about individuals. You can see that these are not individual entrepreneurs, they are teams of entrepreneurs. But more importantly, I remember, some of you might still remember Joschka Fischer. So I think he was Minister of Foreign Affairs in Germany. And he said, well, if Bill Gates would have been born in Germany, there would have been no Microsoft. So it is also very important to know the context of entrepreneurship. And you can see this these days. Well, there is the example of Silicon Valley, but also Startup Berlin, Stockholm, Startup Amsterdam. Ruben will tell you much more about that later on. There's the realization that cities and city regions are also very important to understand the success of entrepreneurship. And there's also a lot of heterogeneity in the degree to which regions are able to stimulate entrepreneurship. And here we go. People are talking about entrepreneurial ecosystems or startup ecosystems or scale-up ecosystems. I was very much critical on this concept, I think, from 5 to 10 years ago, because everyone was talking about it, but nobody really defined it, and there was no underlying idea about what causes what. It's about a bit like community. Everybody likes it, but nobody really knows why they like it or how it works. But entrepreneurial ecosystems, everybody's talking about, a lot of stakeholders are recognize it, and they also recognize it because the metaphor stimulates our thinking about that things are interdependent, that government cannot steer everything, that it is something that collects people within a region to collectively work on. So I think these are the good things of the metaphor. The bad thing is that it's not really defined, and it can just be a fashion, and within 10 years we will talking about something else and forget all about all this. So my sort of contribution to this debate is that I've tried to combine all academic scientific insights about, well, what do we know about entrepreneurship and economic development, and how can we inform policy practice, entrepreneurs that have a somewhat more public spirit, and how can we stimulate the interface between science and practice to make the economy better. Well, one thing that scientists do is to come up with definitions, to at least have a language that is shared. So together with Ben Spiegel from the University of Edinburgh, where we defined entrepreneurial ecosystems as a set of interdependent actors and factors governed in such a way that they enable productive entrepreneurship within a particular territory. That is quite an abstract definition, sorry for that, but you can build upon that and also accumulate knowledge to make those entrepreneurial ecosystems better. And I think the nice thing is that there are a lot of actors that care about entrepreneurial ecosystems in the real world, but they're also talking about this. Here I give 2 examples from the Netherlands. We had Startup Delta, which is now called Tech Leap. Ruben was also involved in this, which was a very proactive organization to put entrepreneurship and the ecosystem for entrepreneurship at the map in the Netherlands, to make governments, corporates aware of their function, their role in stimulating something they all care about, namely entrepreneurship. And the Netherlands also particularly was I think early on aware that this is very much also a regional affair. So you see here the skyline of Dutch startup ecosystems. You can see already around 10 or 11 different regions with different specializations, and also my own hometown, which is next door to Amsterdam, you have Startup Utrecht. So that is an organization that cares about startup scale-ups and is also bringing together different stakeholders to have a vision on where the ecosystem should go to have an analysis on what are the weakest link and how to stimulate collective action to make the Utrecht region a better place for entrepreneurship and also for economic development. So everybody is talking about it, and as a scientist you try to understand the causalities behind this, and that can give insights for improving the ecosystem. Because everybody would sort of see a picture of ecosystems. You have sort of the factors under the ground, so to say, the infrastructure, education, networks, capital, culture, that are somewhat hard to grasp, but we all know these are important levers. And we see a lot of people, stakeholders in the world around us, customers, investors, service providers, governments, NGOs, employees, venture capitalists, entrepreneurs themselves that are important players into this ecosystem. But providing a picture or a movie of an ecosystem is not really going to help to improve it. So we need to, let's say, take a step back and understand what is in this ecosystem that makes entrepreneurial activity better and that leads to aggregate value creation. I'm checking whether you're all still online. Can you give me some hints?
I am.
Yes.
I am too.
That's the bad thing of Teams, because if I do this in Zoom, I can still see you, but in Teams somehow the audience disappears. So it's good to hear you once in a while.
Can I ask you a question, Erik?
Yeah,
in between? Just to see if we can also create some interactivity. You talk about ecosystems. You gave a lot of examples. Is there an ideal size for an ecosystem? And by size, I mean sort of square meters.
Yeah. This question has also been troubling me, of course, and has also been asked me many times. And I can give, I would say, at least two answers to that. So one is from a causal point of view, because I said, and I'm going to show you in a minute, what are the most essential elements of an ecosystem. And if you know this, well, let me give the answer by going through this slide, because I think that is you're spot on in that sense. So the question of what is the optimal size or the relevant size of an entrepreneurial ecosystem, you can answer this by saying, well, what is the relevant spatial scale of the key elements of an ecosystem? So what matters for entrepreneurship in your region? Well, there has been hundreds, if not thousands of studies worldwide about entrepreneurship and economic development. And we know that there is a limited set of factors that is important for understanding the performance of an ecosystem. So first and foremost, I would say the presence of human talent, of human capital. Second, knowledge, so investments in new knowledge. Capital, financial capital. So a lot of entrepreneurial activities don't generate returns yet, so they are excessively dependent on external capital. Intermediate services that lower the thresholds for working together with other parties, for setting up value chains. Networks that lowers the barriers to diffusing knowledge, information, etc. And more fundamental, because this all happens in a context, for example, like Amsterdam or New York. But if you go to the Kurdistan region of Iraq, this doesn't really happen, because there are more fundamental causes that need to be safeguarded as well. So having formal institutions, having a rule of law, having a culture of trust, culture of entrepreneurship is of fundamental importance for long-term growth. Having a physical infrastructure, either digital or, let's say, roads and traffic, and effective demand. So that's also what we see now in the Corona crisis, that a falling demand has a huge impact on the nature of the ecosystem and entrepreneurship. So the first answer to your question, Erik, that was a bit of a long introduction, is what is the relevant spatial scale of an ecosystem? That is the relevant spatial scale for all these different elements. So, for example, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to recruit talent, it's very likely that this talent will be within a 45-minute radius of your firm. We know from studies in labor economics that the relevant daily labor market area is about an area of 45 minutes around a firm. So, for example, for Amsterdam or for Utrecht, it would almost be the whole of the west of the Netherlands. And you can also see that is, let's say, quite relevant for entrepreneurs starting in Amsterdam or Utrecht. They will want recruit people from Groningen, the north of the Netherlands, or from another country. Sometimes that happens, but let's say 80 to 90%. And even if that happens, the talent will be moving towards that region of a daily urban system, so to say. For knowledge, it is somewhat bigger. So on the one hand, we know that proximity to university is very important to source knowledge, but also scientists can work on a longer distance, although there are a lot of tacit knowledge, so knowledge that is not codified needs more proximity. For capital, the daily, let's say, loan or lending relation with banks is very often with a local bank and not with a national, let's say, even say an international bank. If you are expanding and you want to make use of informal investors, then it might be a 1 to 2 hours drive from your main location, which also counts for venture capital. Intermediate services is also about, I would say, 1 to 2 hours. So what I want to say, if you look at the causal mechanisms that are involved in understanding the success of an ecosystem, it is very often an area in which people can network, in which they can exchange labor, and that is a region with about, let's say, a 45 minutes, a 1 hour radius. And for small countries like Albania and the Netherlands, I would say that is the core region of the Netherlands. But also if you're in Groningen or in a peripheral part of Albania, you would probably look at the northeastern or northwestern part of the country. But I would say something that is bigger than a municipality, but smaller than a country. For smaller countries, this is sort of overlapping, but if you look at the US or Russia, of course, there might be many different scales. The difficulty is that there's no, let's say, one area in which everything can be fitted. So, for example, if you look at the more fundamental cause of long-term growth, institutions, or physical infrastructure, these are elements that are very often determined at the state level or at the national level. So you might have to look at a broader area. And we also, so one of the introductory speakers talked about diaspora entrepreneurship or diaspora phenomena, and then you can see that some ecosystems are connected. So, for example, we know that some the Silicon Valley itself is also connected to a lot of different other areas. So then you might think about inter-ecosystem relations. But my short answer, Erik, is I would say a region that is somewhat larger than a municipality but smaller than a country, because that is the scale in which most interactions take place that are relevant for entrepreneurs, and also in which leaders can develop collective action. The second answer would be an ecosystem for a civil servant is the area for which the civil servant is responsible. So if you're working for the municipality of Amsterdam, your relevant area for entrepreneurship is the municipality of Amsterdam. If you're working for the province of North Holland, it would be the province of North Holland. On the one hand, that is where, let's say, democratic principles come in, and they say, well, you can spend your money because you are responsible for that jurisdiction. I think that the disadvantage is that limits the space too much towards institutional boundaries. On the other hand, that is the daily, let's say, reality of civil servants. They are responsible for a particular democratic counterpart, which is limited to a particular jurisdiction. It can also be the national level, by the way. But you can see sort of mismatches, because if you're responsible for the Netherlands, might not be that wise to look at the Netherlands as one ecosystem. And I think that's the reason why Startup Delta, now TechLeap, has done a pretty good job by also looking at the region or the Netherlands as a collection of regions. So you also have a sort of a Russian doll problem, if you may say so. So Tirana might be a city and a municipality for which some people are responsible for that ecosystem. But I think if you look at the daily activities of people that work at startups in Tirana, that might be bigger than the Tirana municipality. And if you look at institutions that are important for policy, it might be the country at large. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
I'll get back to that later on, because I also got from some of the participants some nice answers to this question. So the good news is, if you want to understand how to improve your ecosystem, there is some sound academic knowledge that would prioritize particular areas to look at. So networks, leadership, finance, talent, knowledge, and more fundamentally, formal institutions, culture, physical infrastructure and demand. And I've also read the report by Eileen Trenkman. Well done. And if you go through this report, you can already see that in Albania, I would say knowledge is really constrained. The formal institutions, corruptions are a real constraint. A lack of a culture of trust and entrepreneurship is a severe constraint. A lack of finance is a severe constraint. Talent is a bit ambiguous. On the one hand, you have a large share of young, highly educated. On the other hand, they also fly away to other parts of the world, and the investments in education seem to be lower than needed. But this framework provides you a framework for diagnosis, also to learn, well, what is the weakest link of my ecosystem in comparison to relevant benchmarks. So it would not be Silicon Valley, but other, let's say, perhaps European regions. And then understand, well, together with the stakeholders, because you also want their local knowledge beyond a report on objective facts, to get a dialogue on, well, what is really holding back entrepreneurship in our ecosystem the most? So which element is really the weakest link in the ecosystem, and what should we prioritize? And then together with public and private stakeholders, focus on making this weakest link stronger so that you get the biggest result with the least public money, so to say. Clear so far? If yes.
Yes, yes.
Yes.
So the interesting thing, as a follow-up on Erik's question, you also gave a lot of reactions to what is the relevant scale of the ecosystem. And the interesting thing is that I got this sort of Russian doll problem right in my face, because some people say it's the business park, which is for example very micro. So we also see, for example, in the Netherlands, we have science parks or campuses which are seen as an ecosystem. Some say it's the city of Tirana, some say it's the greater Tirana area, others say it's Albania as a country. Others even said, well, it is also the parts of neighboring countries that speak the same language. And others even say, no, we are part of a global ecosystem. So that is, I found already interesting to see how your own perception is of what is the relevant ecosystem, which I think is partly informed by your own role. So what are you responsible for? That is, let's say, the public administration logic, which we should also take into account. And also the type of startups you are confronted with yourself, because that also determines, let's say, the relevant scope, spatial scope that you talk about. But I would say in general, the most, let's say, optimal skill to organize those things is something between a city and a country. So a city region normally is the radius in which you can realize best the interaction and interdependence in a fertile way to stimulate entrepreneurial activity. So we answered that question of your set of questions. Then let me focus on the roles of universities in entrepreneurial ecosystems.
Erik, before you do, you told me that you cannot see the chat, right?
No.
So if there are questions coming in there, would you like them to be raised now or wait until you're finished?
If they are of, if possible now, and if they are too much in detail later on.
Okay, well, so, I'll just try. There's one question from Arjan. Do you want to raise the question yourself, Arjan, or do you want me to read it from the chat? There's no answer coming, so I'll read it from the chat.
Well, yeah, read it from the chat. It would be shorter.
Okay. Well, the question is, it says, Erik, question when possible, to talk also a little bit about the role of knowledge, trust, and research orientation.
In general?
Yes.
I will take knowledge. I can do it straight on. So one important insights we gained from research on entrepreneurship and economic development in over the last, I would say, 2 decades is that knowledge is a very important source of entrepreneurial opportunities. So we see that regions which invest a lot in knowledge are a wellspring of entrepreneurial opportunities, because we now live in a knowledge-based economy and an entrepreneurial economy, and much more than, let's say, the previous century. A lot of entrepreneurial opportunities that are going to make a difference are based, sometimes very direct, sometimes very indirect. So that's also why the example of Apple is very nice. they are based on fundamental or investments in fundamental knowledge. Because if you look at ICT, if you look at the role of social media, and now we see, for example, artificial intelligence, biomaterials, quantum mechanics will soon pop up. These all have their roots in fundamental knowledge. And creating knowledge is a very local phenomenon, but understanding it as well. So if you have no, let's say, investments in knowledge in your region, perhaps not even to create advanced knowledge, but also to understand the knowledge that is created around the world, you are lacking a very important element or source of new opportunities for entrepreneurship. So that is what I would like to say about knowledge as an element in entrepreneurial ecosystems. Trust.
Professor,
yep.
Can I interrupt you?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, I have some problem with my microphone.
I can hear you.
Just back right now. So just elaborating these three topics as I mentioned there. Well, it didn't came me. It's like it just didn't bright me right now. This came out from research I conducted like in 2018, supported by Perform, like a Swiss corporation, let's say. And this was the outcome. So the research, the study was based to elaborate and see like the gap analysis and what's practice was going on in Albania regarding the cooperation between research sector and entrepreneurship, so business, let's say private sector. And this was three like major outcome, which that's why I wanted to take it out. So yeah. First, there was the problem with research orientation from universities. So they didn't know how to orientate their studies or their students or their thesis regarding something actual and practical. So which private sector then could apply them. So that was the first problem. So how we solved that in your case. The second problem was there was a trust issue. So entrepreneurs, let's say, didn't trust universities or research centers in order to cooperate with them and to find out what's going on. So will they provide something qualitative or not? So the outcome in there, we thought that would be like starting in small scale. So they start with little projects, and then later on you can build on it. So they can build trust. And the final outcome, which we thought, and I saw that you were really touched upon it. So it was knowledge transfer units, which probably this will be a really great outbreak here in Albania, because more of universities have already like project offices, but they very few or none of them are touching up on this topic. So knowledge transfer units, which they can then transfer this information gathered from all studies done and researches to entrepreneurs so they can get profit out of it. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I will first answer your questions in a generic way, and then I will give specific answers in my second part of the lecture on the roles of universities and entrepreneurial ecosystems, because the answers to your question are also tackled in that. So first was knowledge. Knowledge has become an increasingly important source of entrepreneurial opportunities. Perhaps not only the knowledge that is created in your region itself, because that let's say the world frontier of knowledge might only be in a few regions, but you also need to invest in knowledge to understand the knowledge that is created around the world, and to make new combinations from that as an entrepreneur. So also the absorptive capacity argument, so to say. The second is the role of trust. Well, if you live in a society in which people don't trust each other, it's extremely hard to collaborate with each other in groups and informally, and it's extremely hard to create successful ventures, and also to stimulate employees to become entrepreneurs, because Apple, Google, 3M, for example, have not only become big because they had entrepreneurial founders, but also because they allowed their employees to be entrepreneurial. That is something that we often forget about, or has not been that prominent in the debate. But if you don't have employees that act entrepreneurial, it's very hard to continue to grow your business. And this is very unlikely to happen if there are very low levels of trust in society. So if you are not willing and able to delegate work to employees, then you are almost limited to more words autarky, or to very strictly contractualized interactions, which is not very helpful for entrepreneurship. So that's the role of trust. And the role of research orientation is, I think, in a knowledge-based economy, the essential, let's say, skill for creating new value is to combine, to be experimental, to combine sets of knowledge and to experiment, to look, well, what works, what doesn't work, and to start small and to make ambitious hunches. And once you find out that something works, and a lot of things won't work, so that you need to also have a high tolerance of failure, then you can scale up. And that is very essential of a knowledge-based economy. So in that sense, research orientation, not only for university itself, but also for students, is important, because you want to stimulate this experimental approach. I will get back to a few of your very specific questions within a moment, because I also got a lot of feedback from the different universities. The good news is I think there are 30 universities, even in a small country like Albania. That also made me think, why do you need 30 universities? Erik?
So before we go, because there's one more question, I do want to give Alona the opportunity to, sorry, as a wait for a little bit, because I have to like admit people back and forward. The system seems to be a little bit unstable this afternoon. But there's one more question from Ilona around the framework as well. Ilona, yeah. Has that been answered, Ilona?
Not yet, but maybe Professor Stam can answer at the end, because I think we have been interrupting him like a lot.
Go on.
He's have not been able to actually conclude one argument. So if that's fine by you, I'm here all afternoon. So we might as well have this discussion at the end. I can ask at the end. So please do go on. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, we'll keep it.
It's good for me either way. All right. So the question of today, I think, is, well, what is our role as a university in the economy, and how can an entrepreneurial ecosystem framework be of help to take our best role in stimulating the economy? Because I think traditionally universities have been there for creating new knowledge and for stimulating and developing talent. I think that is still the most important task also in the ecosystem a university can have. But universities have also become more aware of their role in society, in the economy. Sometimes in the Anglo-Saxon context, this is called the third mission. But I think it should not really be a third, it should really be primary based or around talent and knowledge. And also looking at your universities and also at your feedback and also my own experience, you can say that first and foremost, universities are a very important source of talent. Second, they are a very important source of knowledge. But what people, I think, more and more realize is that they are also can be an important source of culture. So education is also a way to change culture in society. So, for example, I've done studies on how ambitious people are and how entrepreneurial, and it seems that in early adolescence, that is the phase in which you can change most of the, let's say, need for achievement and creativity, and not later in life. So education is extremely important for also changing culture, although that's a long-term issue. They're also providing physical infrastructure via incubators. Sometimes they're providing intermediate services, for example, with knowledge transfer offices. They might be a hub in networks. So what we see, for example, in the Netherlands, but also in the UK, in the US, is that universities are also very important to create or stimulate networks in the region. They are also a sort of a platform function and sometimes also act as connectors between different regions. So, for example, university connections in other countries. They can be part of leadership in a region. So you see, for example, a lot of public-private initiatives in which universities are also taking part. For example, in the Cambridgeshire area, I know university officials have been very important in stimulating the Cambridgeshire area, sometimes also constraining them. So you should really be aware also of the dark side sometimes of university officials getting involved in regional economic issues. Just to give you a few examples, and I think most important, the role of the university is a source of talent. So without talent, entrepreneurship is almost unimaginable, and this is just one of the core businesses of the university. So you'd better do it in a way that also serves the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So many nascent entrepreneurs, especially if the education level of the society is increasing, have in some period of their life gone or been through the university system. And also, I think something I would like to emphasize over and over again, entrepreneurs. So perhaps you don't have to set up your own firm. Sometimes you might even be more productive as an employee than as a founder. But being entrepreneurial as an employee is also very important, especially for higher educated people. So that's, I think, also a key element of universities, that they prepare their students to be entrepreneurs, and perhaps later on they can become independent entrepreneurs, or they can be a sort of a cycling between those different roles. Universities can focus on student ventures. I think experimenting with entrepreneurship during your education is a nice thing to do, and something that universities should also stimulate. But I think even more important is spin-offs, and even more important is alumni. So you are preparing people to act as valuable citizens of the knowledge society. And I think the universities have a very primary role in preparing human beings to take this innovative, value-creating role. They can be employees of entrepreneurial ventures, and of course we also educate talent to be knowledge developers, to come up with solutions to societal challenges, and perhaps not to be entrepreneurs themselves, or perhaps not even entrepreneurs, but at least provide new sets of knowledge in which entrepreneurs can jump on and can make more short-term solutions and develop business models. So this is very, very important. And I think one thing I learned, so I used to be at the University of Cambridge, which there was a very explicit focus on entrepreneurship, but it was because a lot of alumni and local entrepreneurs were strongly connected to the university. So the university itself perhaps should not be that entrepreneurial, but you should make sure that entrepreneurs are connected to your teaching, to your research, because that really gives students role models. It exposes them to the entrepreneurial process. It also exposes staff members to entrepreneurs. Of course, not all staff members have to become entrepreneurs. Well, preferably not, because then there would be no professors left, although there can be also rotation there. But make sure that entrepreneurs, especially alumni entrepreneurs, know how to contribute to the university research and education. I think one of the questions is, at least I always get this, well, what is the success factor of entrepreneurial ecosystems? Well, there's not one success factor, but a recipe for failure is not involving entrepreneurs in entrepreneurial ecosystem efforts. That is, I would almost say, a guaranteed recipe for disaster. And that also counts for universities. Second, knowledge, and that's a bit, I'm giving answers that follow up on the conversation we had. So normally, or traditionally, universities are seen as source of pure basic research. Don't get me wrong, this is still important, but I think much more fruitful is to go to the so-called Pasteur's quadrant, because I think over the past decades we have been favoring ivory tower scientists a bit too much. And this is what I want to tell. So on the one axis, you see the quest for fundamental understanding. I think that is what universities are for. So that should be high. Don't get me wrong. I think that is what distinguishes universities from other types of educational institutes. But consideration of use is also important. So we have the sort of traditional Boer quadrant, in which universities focus on pure basic research, in which scientists just can't be bothered about what the relevance of their research is. I think in times when we are a lot of developed or a lot of dependent upon public research money, you cannot just say, well, trust us, we know what we're doing. You should also be aware of, well, what are the basic problems in society? So you should also take into account the consideration of use, or what we call the Pasteur quadrant. And for example, my own university had sort of as a motto, curiosity driven. So yes, we are there for the quest for fundamental understanding, but relevant for research or relevant for society. So it's not either or, but if as universities we can both be curiosity driven, but also relevant for society, the Pasteur quadrant, I think that is the most fertile breeding ground for universities as a player in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. You might also become, let's say, active in the Edison quadrant, in which you look at applied research. I think there's a role for that, but I think universities are not the best agents to be in that quadrant. They are still there for fundamental understanding, which sets them aside from other educational institutes. But I think we should make a move more from pure basic research towards using inspired research. There were some questions about university interaction. And of course, that is mainly about bringing together the public and the private knowledge creation. And I think bringing that together can be very fruitful, not in a linear way, so how university knowledge enriches industry, but I think it is most fruitful if there's a cycle. So a knowledge I would say, a mutual learning, because university staff members can be inspired by practice. They can also get inspiration, they can get funding from industry, and industry, of course, can get knowledge from university. And they can also, for example, temporarily put people into universities, or vice versa, university can people into industry. So you would like to have this knowledge circulation going as good as possible. So, for example, the University of Cambridge might be best known as a hotspot for Nobel Prizes, but a lot of local high-tech firms were also connecting with professors. Some professors were also co-founders of startups, but also a lot of the postdocs and PhDs, which did not get a position in the university, then went to the local SMEs. And in that way, they had personalized ties between the university and industry. So you should really look at how you can make this work at a personal level, because if you just focus on big universities and big organizations, it's very hard to get this mutual learning in place. So please look as much as possible, I would almost say via the talent element, how you can make this university industry interaction work. And the more alumni also you have, or the more people you can talk to get into this university industry interaction. And then last, and I would say also explicitly least, tech transfer or knowledge transfer organizations. To be honest, I think this role is highly overestimated. So if you look at the number of alumni of universities, the number of students, these are much more fundamentally and qualitatively important than a tech transfer offer or a knowledge transfer offers. I know I'm sort of kicking against the legs of some people here, but of course it might be a fragment of stimulating the circulation of knowledge from universities to the world of practice. But having an alumni policy, having staff that is connected to the world outside is so much more important than having a tech transfer office. Very often a tech transfer office is explicitly set up to make sure that the intellectual property rights are safeguarded, which might be an important element, but it's more likely to be a hindrance than a stimulus of the entrepreneurial ecosystem. No questions on this?
Not particularly on that, Erik, I think. I still want to go back to the Alona's question, because I think it's fascinating and I'm just staring at it and I want to get an answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Arjan. I'm here. I can say it myself if
yeah, you can. Yeah, of course you do. Please do.
Thank you so much for saying that tech transfer offices are overrating. I am applauding you from my house. I also think that there is a lot of efforts being spent there instead of being spent elsewhere. And I also think that having a very rigid IP structure more hinders than helps innovation. I think it puts innovators in a monopoly position and then they stop innovating instead of making them more part of the open competition. So this was just a reaction to what I just heard. Then coming back to my question, I'm sure you're familiar with the proximity framework brought forth by Boschma and Franken. They identify 5 different types of proximity, and physical proximity just one of them, with the institutional and social and cultural proximity playing also a very important role. And more often than not, I see in Albania a lot of emphasis being put on the physical aspect of it, and trying to approach innovation and entrepreneurship like adopting a viewpoint of districts or science parks or techno parks or what have you, instead of focusing on the network, which I think is first and foremost a relational process. So if you can weigh in on this based on your research and experience. Thank you.
Yeah. So physical proximity in itself, I would say, is useless if there's no interaction. Well, of course you can say fundamentally it increases the probability that you will meet someone else, but more importantly is that it will probably bring you in organizational closeness to people, so that you understand what the organization is about and what might be your mutual interest. It is more likely that you share literally a language or a culture which helps for interaction. But this might be gained. So, for example, if you are alumni of Cambridge University, that is probably much more important for getting connections to Cambridge than just being in the Cambridge region. So yes, to be an alumni of Cambridge, you need to have been in Cambridge for a while, or to be an alumnus of, let's say, IBM or of Google. But you can maintain this link without staying physical proximate. So maintaining a network relation or organizational closeness is probably much more important. And yes, physical proximity might play a role shortly, but not necessarily, you don't need it all the time. And we see this in, for example, in a lot of campuses or incubators or accelerators in which people talk about physical proximity, but most of their contacts are not with the people in the same building, but with people that they are building a product with customers, with suppliers. And I think rightfully so, because these are much more important for the business process than someone that is sitting on a floor below you. So we also tend to overemphasize physical proximity. Not that it is not important, because in order, if you want to build up the other types of proximity which are essential for long-term productive interactions, being physically proximate for a while might very much help, but it is not of overriding importance. And if you have built up your network, you can very easily maintain all these ties and being on a longer distance, and you have to perhaps even think about how to connect different regions with networks. And to give you another example, that perhaps, well, as a scientist, I'm always in doubt of myself, so you can also give a counter argument, which is valid to some degree. For example, the Cambridgeshire area, it is important to be in the Cambridgeshire area to some degree, because if you are close to each other, that enables you to interact with people that are very different from you. So, for example, if you're in a big city, that exposes you to people that are very different. Well, if you want to get in connection with people that are very different, but also very far away, it is very hard to communicate and to get into a collaboration. So for those people that are very different, but might be relevant for you, then a hotspot of people, high density of people in close proximity to each other might be very helpful. So it's perhaps in contrast to what I just said, for some particular very diverse sets of knowledge, it might be useful to be in close proximity. But for many other aspects of entrepreneurship, I would say organizational proximity or network proximity is much better than just physical proximity. And even I think there's also an overrated element of proximity if you look at all those campuses and incubators in which people hardly interact with each other, or perhaps not even have productive interactions. They might meet each other, but it might not lead to a lot of entrepreneurial opportunities. Does that give an answer to your question?
It does. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, and then I think one of the fundamental issues of the entrepreneurial ecosystem approach, which I really like and I think is very much under-discussed until now, is the interdependence between different elements. And I think that is also a counter story towards copying Silicon Valley, because, or just pushing one button, which policymakers like. They say, well, we're just going to invest in knowledge now, and then everything else will be all right. Well, let's take this advantage, this example of knowledge. A lot of governments around the world, regional governments, say, well, we don't invest enough in knowledge, and that is why we have low levels of entrepreneurship. You might even recognize it from your own back garden. And yes, we know knowledge is very important for entrepreneurship. It can be a source of entrepreneurial opportunities, and increasing the investments in knowledge in general might be useful, positive for entrepreneurship. But think about this for a moment. If you're going to stimulate, if the Albanian government is going to push up research and development, for example, also at universities. But if there are no talents that are willing to jump with this knowledge towards practical applications, well, these investments in knowledge will not stimulate entrepreneurship. And let us even say that there is investment in knowledge and also investment in talent that is open for new combinations of knowledge, but there's no culture of entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship is not valued. So people have a very high fear of failure. They are not allowed to experiment. Well, then you might have knowledge and talent, but this culture will still constrain the development of entrepreneurship in your region. let's say that you have you increase knowledge, you increase talent, and yes, you change culture, which is a very hard thing to do. But then you might have, for example, labor market regulations, which withhold people to move from one organization to the other because they have a lot of certainties attached to their labor contract, for example, which was the case in the Netherlands. And if you don't change these formal institutions, for example, also non-compete covenants, so that it's very hard to leave your organization and to pursue a new idea, there might be knowledge, talent, and even culture, but formal institutions will withhold people to join a university spin-off, for example. And even if you have knowledge, talent, culture, and formal institutions are changed, but if there are no services, for example, on legal issues, on how to realize innovation, etc., it will be hard for those newcomers they have to organize everything without the boundaries of their organization. So they also need intermediate services. But even if knowledge, talent, culture, formal institutions, and intermediate services are in place, then these fledgling university spin-offs might be a startup, but once they need to grow, they need external finance. And if there are no business angels or venture capitalists to bring them to the next level, it's very hard to stimulate the level of entrepreneurship. So this tells you that it's not, entrepreneurship policy is not a policy of pushing one button. It is very much appreciating what is the next bottleneck in the system that withholds entrepreneurship to flourish in order to enable the generation of new value. And I think the entrepreneurial ecosystem framework is a framework that enables collective learning. So you need to bring knowledge together about, well, what is the weakest link in the element at the moment, bring together people from different elements of the entrepreneurial ecosystem to use their local knowledge and to together have a dialogue on, well, what is currently holding back entrepreneurship. And that can be different in different phases. And it's very unlikely that just one intervention will stimulate all over entrepreneurship levels in your region or country. So I think that's a very important lesson. The entrepreneurial ecosystem framework enables you to learn collectively on how to improve step by step with the relevant stakeholders your entrepreneurial ecosystem. And I think this lesson we should all learn and get better at, and also use as much as possible data about our own ecosystem, but also bring together local knowledge from people that have deep knowledge about the ecosystem and to confront that with objective information and bring that together to have the best diagnosis that is possible, and also to think about the best possible solutions, which will always be context specific, but of course you can learn from other contexts, be it Trento in Italy or Alabama, or perhaps even the United Arab Emirates, for example, but always take into account your specific context. Well, what is the specific diagnosis and how are we in our context specific way going to solve this? And if you're going to solve this, you also need to monitor, well, to what degree is the ecosystem really changing in a direction that we envision it, which is almost never fully the case because there are so many other factors that can be of importance, and also you might have global shocks that you need to deal with. But please continue to learn and continue to learn effectively on how to improve your ecosystem, and that is what the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Framework enables you to do. And I think, and Ruben will tell you much more about that university can be even more proactive and more broad in tackling entrepreneurial ecosystem problems, because I left finance, formal institutions and demand out of my story until now. But even universities, for example, by bringing together their alumni, can act as financiers. So some universities also have their venture capital funds. They can also, if universities together lobby towards the local or central government, change institutions. So for example, Dutch universities have been active also in changing labor regulations. You can collectively lobby for changing knowledge regulations. And please don't forget, universities are also an important source of demand. You buy all kinds of stuff, for example, also in the scientific domain. So you can be a lead user of initial entrepreneurial ventures. So you can, I would say, most importantly, focus on your role as talent provider and knowledge provider, but you can be aware of the different, let's say, strengths and weaknesses of your ecosystem and can play many roles either direct or indirect, for example, as a platform or via your alumni to improve all elements of the ecosystem. So the University of Tirana, Epoca University, Polish University, I can hardly pronounce it, Kiaraji College. You can all play multiple roles, but you need to be aware of your relevant place in the ecosystem and where you can contribute most. And then an entrepreneurial ecosystem approach helps you to position yourself. We can do a Q&A. I think we have about 15 or 10 minutes left. If there's one final word I would like to say, and then we can delve more deeply into the Q&A, is that I think the University of the 21st Century is a place which recombines disciplinary knowledge. So I think still the traditional role of educating students in a particular, deeply in a particular discipline is still important, but also make them aware of how to combine their discipline with other disciplines, because innovations are almost always combinations of different disciplines, and we better prepare students, either young ones or old ones, to recombine these different disciplines, and also of scientific knowledge with practical knowledge. I think that's also the lesson of the Pasteur quadrant. So we can make university knowledge so much more relevant if we are also aware and open for the world outside. It also necessitates to bring people from the world outside inside as guest lecturers, as collaborators for research, as collaborators for curricula of teaching. And I think ultimately universities are here to prepare students to create new value in a knowledge society. So please be aware of that and also prepare them for that. And universities should be aware and can play a key role in entrepreneurial ecosystems. Perhaps not as a leader, because that I think is perhaps to other players, but they are very important feeders with multiple roles, primarily talent and knowledge, but probably or potentially a lot of other roles. And I think also Ruben will guide you through the whole portfolio or genres that universities can play a role, even tomorrow or today. You don't have to wait for years to make that work. I hope I've given you insights into how an entrepreneurial ecosystem framework has evolved over time, how you can use it, and I think most importantly, how you can use it as a tool, as a lens to make the economy better and to take your role as a university in a most productive way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erik. That was fantastic. Just before we go to a question in the chat, I know that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to join the chat. I think it's because you're logged in probably to a different account for some reason. If you go through a university account, you won't be able to use the chat because you're invited by the incubator. So an option could be to log in and log out with a new account, so with the ACE incubator account. If that doesn't work, then please send your questions via email. Or even my WhatsApp number that I've shared as well. So so please do that. So keep an eye on my email as well. Arjan, you mentioned a question on knowledge transfer, right? You say how can knowledge be transferred through the ecosystem in a sustainable way? Maybe you can elaborate on that, because it came in at a certain point in the conversation of Erik.
Yeah, that was exactly because it looks like in Maastricht University, and all professor mentioned, it looks like it's working quite well. Whole networking issue, as I mentioned before, and trust issue and everything. And the main thing I think also is that it's not that also in Albania there's a lot of good work is done here in universities, and the entrepreneurs, they are quite open in that consideration. But the problem is when it comes, let's say, into interlinkage between them, this interlinkage it's lost, and you have to renew it every once in a while. So this is the knowledge which is built, so you have to rebuild it next year. So how you can be stable on keeping this knowledge, and how you can transfer it in such, let's say, productive way. What was your take on this? Thank you.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and people tend to forget about this, by educating students, you are building a bridge towards the world outside. And this is just a key activity of the university. And please be aware of where your students go to, because they know you, and they act as a natural bridge to the world outside, and it can be industry or government. And there are so many agents that do this, alumni. So be aware of that. The second is set up projects with organizations from outside, because there should be some mutual advantage. There's also sometimes a ridiculous point of view, also in the Netherlands, that universities should serve all SMEs and self-employed. But if we would do that, yeah, then there would be no proper teaching and research. So you should also think about a mutual advantage. So for example, I've been working in a lot of consortia with big businesses, and sometimes they just do it for PR. And I think, to be honest, it's nice to get the money from big business, but that doesn't really help us to co-create knowledge. But if there is a organization that wants to, for example, develop new fintech solutions, and we have algorithms developed here at the math department, and that can deliver insight on how to improve this fintech firm, well, then you have sort of a mutual advantage of building up a knowledge base. Or if you, for example, are working on how to improve working situations for people in a particular large business, and you have knowledge about how, let's say, psychology, occupational psychology, about how the design of work improves the creativity of people, well, then you can deliver insights to that organization, and you can even do experiments in that business organization to also improve the science. So first and foremost, alumni, raising your students, that's a point of entry to the world outside, and you're doing that anyway, so please make use of it in a smart way. Then look for collaborations that are of mutual advantage, because it doesn't make sense to collaborate with all SMEs and self-employed, because if there's no mutual advantage, it won't be durable and it's a waste of time. And for example, if you have PhDs or postdocs that are jointly funded, that helps a bit. But I think having PhDs and postdocs that are going to work in SMEs or startups is even better, because then you can also use them as a bridge between science and industry practice. This might sound quite simple, stupid, but I think, well, we also need to be aware of how we can have the lowest threshold of reaching out to industry, and setting up large consortia with a photo moment and everything in the press. Yeah, I'm a bit sober about that, whether that is really the way forward.
Well, quite enlightful actually, your insight, Professor. Just one technical, let's say, add-on on this one. So can you tell me, how do you, technically point of view, how do you organize? So how do you keep track of all this data, all this knowledge? So in case that SME comes to university and asks that I need this research, so it's an algorithm, or it is a software, or it is just a market research, whatever is that about. So they have to ask somebody, so a person in the university. So this person should be aware of where this data is and where to look for, and to see and to match this here's demand with the existing one, or they have to create a new one. So
yeah, in an ideal
office, it's possible in this case.
In an ideal world, and I've also seen this happening, the university has a sort of a customer relationship management tool or database, in which someone from outside knocks on the door and say, I want to have knowledge about algorithms for improving life expectancy from COVID-19. And this guy from the University Knowledge Transfer Institute puts this into the database, and then someone pops up. Well, I can spare you the energy. Universities are not really well in doing this. So a lot of people from outside just Google. So I think making scientists aware of their public presence and showing what they are doing and getting involved in public debates, either with the business world or via public media, is probably the best way to make yourself heard and show to the world outside what kind of knowledge there is. So I would say it's much more a task also of staff members themselves to be aware of their public profile, and that can just be the website of the university, very basically. But if I look at my own colleagues, how many colleagues don't have a proper web profile? Because they think, well, I'm the world specialist in A, B, or C, so people will find me. Well, that might not always be the case. So I think much more stimulating your staff to be aware of your public profile, actively or let's say more passively, and not this database. Well, this database might help, but perhaps Ruben can jump in later. I don't know of universities that have really made good use of that. Perhaps alumni communities might be a very good way to do that, and that might be enabled by a database, but then the alumni community in itself, I think, is much more important than the database per se. So I would say trying to stimulate communities and making your staff aware of their public profile, of how they can be found by the world outside is much more important.
Lovely. Well, since I can also take more of your time, and because this is a lovely topic, and this was also part of my PhD and research I've done lately. I'm working as actually a researcher and also entrepreneur, so I'm trying to boost the research outcome going around here in Albania to SMEs mainly. I want to ask this one or two. So, okay, we know now how to do universities. So the other approach, how we can increase awareness on SMEs so they can, let's say, not be so shy and come to universities asking help, even when they don't know what to ask about. So,
yeah, here again, I think it's a big misunderstanding that SMEs are sort of willing and able to connect to universities in a very productive way. That should also be stimulated. So, for example, even in the Netherlands, there's a big group of SMEs that has no idea about what they can do with university knowledge, and perhaps the question is whether they can even be productively connected or whether they should focus on other types of educational institutes and not universities. I think the most important way, again, to make SMEs realize and also increase their absorptive capacity to make use of universities is to have students with internships, or to have for universities to create continuous learning together with people from the profession, because universities themselves might not be the best talents to give continuous learning, but if they organize this and also bridge public and private knowledge, they might be a hub to bring SMEs inside. So I would say the circulation of people, students via internships, taking the continuous learning role more seriously, but then as a platform and perhaps not as a main delivery. That is, I think, that might be a useful way to connect SMEs and make them aware of the university knowledge.
Well, now at least we know that which direction to go, and we have to fight in this case the formal, let's say, practices actually, which students are doing right now in companies or SMEs, because they just do it just for finishing their, let's say, obligation toward university. So they hardly see some students going there into SMEs and doing like a real scientific work in there. So we have focused on this. Thank you very much, Professor. Lovely.
Yeah, perhaps as one follow-up upon that, I think students can play a useful role as being a part of the R&D of a SME. But if they're just going to serve coffee and service the copier, yeah, I think that will not help the knowledge circulation.
Cool. Thank you very much. Kind of you.
Thank you, Erik. Are there any other questions from participants? Either I haven't seen anything coming through in chat, so please do, or use my email address so I can push it into the chat. And while I wait for that, it might be an interesting idea to bring Eileen into the conversation. Eileen, if you're still here, it would be great to get your, well, first of all, to hear you talk about the updated research, but maybe also to have a bit of a response on the content that Erik provided today.
Yeah. You're a partner in crime in a sense, huh? So.
Yeah, it was really interesting also to see the factors you mentioned, like knowledge, talent, culture, finance, and the independence. And you are absolutely right. It's essential. Without some of these factors, others don't work. So it's important to look at it and to foster startup ecosystems holistically. So having said that, I'm also happy that I can present a little bit about the updated research today. And I've seen some familiar faces here in the box. As you all know, GIZ did the research last year in January and February, as Jacqueline mentioned, mostly focusing on Tirana. in the time frame of the year, we realized that there is a need also to look at Albania holistically and to really understand what are other cities in Albania doing and how is the interaction with Tirana and other ecosystem actors. So we did a research in September and visited 5 different cities. Among those were Skodra, Durrës, Vlora. We also spoke to a couple of new actors in Tirana. We visited Elbasan and Korça. And having said that, we saw a lot of activities happening in comparison to what we saw earlier. And one of the positive facts I wanted to highlight is that entrepreneurship promotion is gaining traction in universities in Tirana. So Tirana, I saw a lot of you at Poker University and other universities, Polis, having started to look into how to build an incubator. So that's really a positive trend. And I think the initiative of ACE is also a timely initiative to foster more universities and their entrepreneurship activities in Albania. But what we also saw positively is that a few municipalities and regional governments have started to shift their focus from more of an infrastructure development focus to innovation knowledge-based economic development. One of the positive examples is, of course, the city of Korça, and I'm happy also to say that GIZ will support the municipality of Korça in their ambitions to become a local and regional innovation hub. So we see some development there, but of course, a lot of initiatives in these regions do lack strategies, they lack funds, of course. They're often a bit too broad-based and unproportionately focusing on the tourism sector. Korça said we are diverting a little bit from this and we want to become an ICT hub. And we saw this also one of the potential overall for Albania to develop as an ICT startup hub on the borders of Europe, because they do have a very young multilingual population that is looking in self-employment. Some of the initiatives from GIZ are underlying this fact, like the hackathons GIZ is doing to really see how can Albania be placed as a new remote working destination. But of course, some of the factors remain challenging. Also in the overall ecosystem, it is still nascent, and most support organizations are located in Tirana, focusing on pre-ideation and ideation phase. In the regions, we saw a lot of NGOs picking up work that are usually done by innovation support organizations, but they clearly do lack sustained strategies. They do lack the mandate and the knowledge, so a lot of things can be done there. We saw that a lot of entrepreneurship activities in the region is necessity-based, so not because they want to be entrepreneurs, but because there is a need and there's not much opportunity for employment. What we also saw, of course, there's a lack of access to early stage finance across Albania. So in the regions, there donor grants, let's say, but often these are not really used strategically. And one of the biggest challenges we saw, which is especially in the regions, a brain drain. Brain drain either to Tirana or outside of Albania. So a lot of people want to leave the regions, want to go to Tirana, of course, or abroad, which is really a challenge for the regions to further develop. And having spoken also a lot about the different ecosystem actors, of course, cooperation remains a little bit of a challenge. I see in Tirana it is getting better, but in the regions we saw still a big gap of cooperation between the different actors, be it the universities, with the policymakers, or with other support organizations. So this was just a short overview, but I'm happy to also answer some questions if there are any more.
Any questions for Eileen, please put them in the chat as well. While we do that, Erik, I'm actually curious on that brain drain issue, which we hear obviously quite a lot in our conversations in Albania. Do you see that kind of developing entrepreneurial ecosystems is kind of a way to kind of keep people in their local environment and kind of avoid them to move to other and better places?
Yeah, perhaps to risk the danger of anecdotal evidence, Stanford University more or less established its business park because it was afraid that its students would leave to the other side of the US. So this is an age-old problem, so to say. And developing your ecosystem is a way to provide an infrastructure, a context which enables your talents to flourish and to create new value. And if you have a very thin or an undeveloped ecosystem, yeah, you should not be surprised that people leave your region because they can be less valuable, or at least there are less complementary assets to make people very valuable. On the other hand, you can say there's a lot of lack of development, so you can make a difference there. But if there are other regions which you can team up with other people to make you more productive, better developed ecosystems, yeah, it is natural for youngsters to go to those areas. So that is one aspect. The other aspect is there has been a lot of research on diaspora entrepreneurship. In itself, it might not be a bad thing. So if you expose your young talents, young people to international contexts, they might enrich themselves, they might have more worldviews, they might develop their human capital, and it might be good for the home region if they come back and bring all these networks and experience back to their home region and make new combinations in the home region. So I would say in itself, diaspora entrepreneurship or the diaspora of talent is not necessarily a bad thing, as long as they come back and then reinforce the development of the ecosystem back home. But then there needs to be leadership and an awareness of the home region where the ecosystem can be improved and what the role of those diaspora people is, and they should be granted a leadership position. So if the government is still very corrupt and there's a low levels of trust, yeah, then those people won't return, so to say. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I wouldn't see negative. I wouldn't necessarily see it as a negative thing. It might be even very positive because you can make international connections that you wouldn't have if people would just stick to their region.
Thank you. Thanks. I'm sure, Ruben, probably something you probably want to touch on as well, maybe in your talk, or as you are very much in that talent development space, right? And have seen probably in other ecosystems as well. This will be probably something you recognize. So feel free to kind of pick that up in your talk as well.
Sure.
Yeah. I think it's. I mean, we're great on time, so I'm actually very proud that we managed to kind of fit it all in. And I don't see any sort of questions coming in at the moment. You always keep doing that. So keep writing if you do have a question. I suggest we have a brief break, probably 5 minutes, just for everyone to get a drink or visit the bathroom or whatever they want to do, and then come back at kind of 3:36, if I'm correct. So 5 minutes for you all, and then we'll head to Ruben's talk after that. Thank you. Okay. Vobona, I can see you coming in.
Yeah, I'm here, present.
You're here, excellent. Before we go to Ruben, I'm going to hand over to Vobona quickly because there's a short announcement on the upcoming hackathon next week, I think. So Vobona, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, thank you also to the participants and especially the guests for sharing their insight. And it's quite interesting also how the things evolve. We wanted to link the announcement actually with the latest question that arose also a discussion among Arjan, I think, and Erik previously on how to actually bridge the cooperation between universities, so academia and SMEs of the industry. And this is actually what this project is also trying to do, because we have, as of now, conducted a series of 2 hackathons. This is the 3rd one on the way, and its main purpose is really to try to bridge the cooperation between universities, academia, and the society or the industry based on their real life challenges and questions that they might have. So the upcoming hackathon, actually most of the participants from the university side are quite well aware about because they were informed in written. But this is a hackathon that tries to tackle on the issue of how to help Albanian businesses with new affordable digital solutions. And we are quite happy to say that there was some work done to actually get real challenge owners. And in this case, we have unions or associations that represent different types of industries or businesses that they have very clearly stated their needs and necessities. So for example, we have Albanian Commercial Union, Manufacturers Union, Young Entrepreneurs of Albania Union, and so on and forth. And their challenges at the moment are like how to make use of e-commerce, for example, or omnichannel solutions, or how to improve the HR workflows, processes, and transparency with affordable digital solutions. And the 3rd one among the challenges is how to make use of the real-time data and technologies for better decision-making and cooperation. Thus, we trust it's very possible and fruitful to actually engage universities or enthusiastic students, but under some very good guidance of staff and professor, maybe also linking them with external innovators or whatever to join in the hackathon. It will take place next week, starting from 25th till the 27th. So it's a 48-hour event, online event, but it's a very good chance for the universities as well to be exposed to the industries, and hoping that there might be some really very good teams that could also become basically not only an opportunity to establish cooperation, but also for the students to get more support and insight from the business sector as well. So our request to the universities is to really try to encourage more participation from their side among students and colleagues as well, and share that as much as possible, and try to benefit from these small initiatives that could really empower also the local ecosystem in Tirana and Albania. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Vobona. All right, I think we'll head to Ruben for his talk. And I was actually wondering, Erik Boer, if you wanted to, I mean, I know Ruben a little bit, but you know him a lot better. And he has so many hats on, Ruben. He has an incredible amount of activities that he's involved in the ecosystem. So maybe, Erik, if you're there, it would be nice to get your spin on it and do a little introduction if you're there.
I'm here. I'll put on my video. Hello, everybody again. Well, happy to introduce Ruben Nieuwenhuis to you all. Ruben is really a key figure in our ecosystem in many ways, like Arjan says, with many hats. And I think the story of Ruben will take the story of Erik Stam from thinking about ecosystems to building ecosystems. And Ruben at present is a director of TechConnect, which is a platform public-private platform encouraging and stimulating, activating young people to acquire more tech skills, so that we can raise the pool of tech talent in the city. which is now very important for the ecosystem. He used to be one of the initiators and private lead of Startup Amsterdam, which is a program that has been very important for Amsterdam as a startup city. Ruben is an entrepreneur, an investor, a mentor. I know him from many different roles for many years already, and he has been involved in great ecosystem initiatives like a private college for coding, the Codam College, a Dutch Basecamp, connecting ecosystems and entrepreneurs also internationally, Growth Tribe, an academy for growth hacking, well, and so many others, too many to mention. But happy to have you on board, Ruben, for your keynote this afternoon on building ecosystem. And I would say the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Erik. So I was hearing yesterday on the news, you have this thing called Zoom burnouts. I don't know, it's like a bit of the afternoon. I'm sure there's not a Zoom bore out, because it was quite interesting, all the questions and also the presentation from Erik. It's good, Erik Stam, to listen again to the presentation, obviously, and to build on top a bit of the presentation. So first I want to clear out, is the sound good enough? Can everyone hear me? Yeah, perfect. So then what I will do, I will share my screen, and before actually going into the presentation, I will answer a few of the questions, because also Erik Stam was inviting me to answer questions. So I have a few examples that can be, let's say, duplicated. You know, this is the nice wording. It's a bit of a distinguished wording of copy paste. What is happening around the world. And, you know, as an ecosystem builder, you not only relate to all kinds of other ecosystems and peoples and network and knowledge, but you duplicate, you copy paste as well. So let me, by sharing my screen, let me see if this works. Share. So can you now see my screen? I cannot yes. see, or I also cannot, perfect. I also don't see any, let's say, chat functions. So please help me out when there are questions and moderate Arjan or others. Yep. So just one of the questions that were, so now you see a website, MKB, which is in Dutch, Small Medium Enterprises, Digital Workspace. And this is this platform where student talent is being connected with small medium enterprises. They are being educated at universities, but they are bringing their knowledge to small medium enterprises based on cases of these small medium enterprises. And you see, obviously, Corona is you know, happening around the world, and some of the initiatives are actually using Corona to be of help. So when you click Corona Help, this is in Dutch, by the way, then you see the opportunity and the collaboration of university together with all kinds of public and private partners to help small medium enterprises in, for instance, organizing video calls, bringing in more security in their organization, more cyber security, and so on and so forth. This is just one example of so many things that are already happening around the world that is ready to be used by Albania, which is ready to be used by the ecosystem players, by people from Tirana and all other cities around the globe. So this is one example. I know Erik Boer is also actively involved in this one. So just write down MKB Digital Workspace and see how it was the question of one of the participants, how you can duplicate this, how you can bring it into the context of Albania, because you know, you can change it a bit, fit it a bit, and then I'm sure it is applicable in Albania. As an example, another question that was being raised, and again, I'm sharing these insights prior to my presentation because this is on how to do it. You know, there's a lot of talking about, you know, what is ecosystem building, what is strategy, and all that stuff, which is important, which is something we need to learn more about. But on the other hand, it's all about just hands-on. It's just put things into action. And this is what TechLeap did. It was referred to a few times. So a few years ago, like 4 or 5 years ago, nationwide initiative to push the ecosystem had the brand Startup Delta. It now grew into TechLeap. By the way, that by itself is an interesting case. How can you build, a brand, set up a brand that people relate to, Startup Delta, and then transfer it in a way into a new brand, TechLeap. And one of the things they initiated was a science finder tool. You see here all kinds of, let's say, knowledge elements. And I was just clicking. Actually, I was never ever on this website, on this particular part of the website, but I knew about it. And then this question was coming. I was checking in, like, hey, what is then, happening behind this, let's say, science finder? And here you see all kinds of authors, departments, publications. And this is an instrument, and I think it answers a question of one of the participants. How can you actually, bring the knowledge or bring the research available for the startup or tech ecosystem or the entrepreneurial ecosystem as at large?
Yeah, very nice that you mentioned it, Ruben, because I should have mentioned this because this is developed by 2 of my former students. They sold it to TechLeap.
No, yeah, perfect. So, and the thing is, because I was listening and somewhere I was like, I remember that I think 3 months ago or so, prior to COVID-19, TechLeap was super proud, to implement this or announce this. I don't know if it's being used, I don't know the conversion rate and so on and so forth. But what I know, and you are mentioning that they sold it, I am sure, that in whatever way, you can collaborate. Albania can collaborate, use or reuse even this platform. And there's one thing I know for sure, or let's say 95% for sure, that after, these presentations that we gave, everyone is being inspired. Then, you're going to tell your spouses or your colleagues about this inspiring, let's say, dynamics and presentation and examples. And then everyone is going back into the normal and doing just the things they do. And these 2 students that Erik Stam has entree to will never ever receive an email from someone from Albania to, let's say, reuse this science finder, and it will be on an agenda 3 or 4 years later. So, the point I want to make is that it's not so much about understanding the what. It's just about sending that email and just, go from there, being hands-on, put things into action. And in my presentation, I want to share a lot of, let's say, insight on how to do that, but also on, what aspects we went into action. Another example, and I'm just relating to the other presentation, so I will come hopefully to my presentation. But another example that I was learning about, and it relates to the brain drain, and let's say the opposite is a bit of brain gain. One of the stories that I was hearing from China is they have a program. I cannot find it. Let's say I could not find it in the last 10 minutes, but that they sent 100 or 1,000, let's say, experts or student experts on a scholarship, and these are people with an AI background, computer science background, and they send them around the world in all kinds of ecosystems and all kinds of environments, companies, to educate themselves for a year or 2 years or 3 years, and then they come back to China and to have that knowledge bringing back to China. So, this was one of the initiatives or projects I learned about, and I was thinking, hey, how can we apply something like this in the Netherlands or for the Netherlands? And I think there are many people that are, from Albania that love to, bring their knowledge, their networks, their skills, their whole everything in not only being entrepreneurial, but just, growing Albania. And you can also send these people around the world and then, for 1 year or 2 years, and then bring them back. And then you have the knowledge, not as a brain drain, but as obviously a brain gain. And the diaspora was already mentioned. Yeah, make use of the diaspora. A lot of cities, but also countries do exactly this. You might know Le French Tech. This is like the diaspora of French tech entrepreneurs or experts that are from France, working abroad in all kinds of tech and startups. They are feeling connected. They feel being part of the French tech ecosystem. So what they did, they built this brand, La French Tech, and then they relate to one another. So when there are whatever events around the world, La French Tech, the local hubs, are being active. They support, they are preparing the missions and the delegations that come from France into all, these events and these cities. So another challenge that you or another project or initiative that you can launch is set up this global network of diaspora. But what is important here, to build a brand, because at the end of the day, a brand you relate to. Albania as a tech nation or as an entrepreneurial tech hub. Same goes for Tirana. So these are all examples of just, hands on and just, put things in actions. So I just wanted to start with these examples because at the end of the day, it's not about that things are difficult. Things are, actually not that difficult. And sometimes it's even easy. It's just, setting a first step and then take it from there. Are there any questions on this introduction? And I hope, it answered a few questions that are being posted by the participants.
Nothing in chat, Ruben. So if they don't speak up.
Mm-hmm. And what I will do actually, Arjan, obviously the slides are, will be sent with also links, but also I will, put the links in the presentation that I just was gathering. So that is the start. So what I want to start with is, obviously I have some learnings from Amsterdam, as I was responsible for 3.5 years together with Bas Beekman. It was my companion for 3.5, 4 years. He was the public official. He was the civil servant responsible for Startup Amsterdam, and I was the entrepreneur in residence. So I was, on behalf of the private sector, part of Startup Amsterdam. And together we were building and we were developing and we were growing this ecosystem, or at least we were playing a role there. And this is more or less our story, but this is the story from cities and countries around the world who are, doing the same and have the same questions. So I will bring you in a few steps. Obviously, the first is I go a bit more specific on what is, the goal setting, and I will use Startup Amsterdam as an example, but also I will show how we did it or how we're doing it in Ukraine as an example. So it might be a example provided within the framework of Erik Stam, how a city as Amsterdam is pushing for ecosystem development, entrepreneurial development. Then the question is how, go action driven, but how do we do that? How do we organize it? What are specific initiatives to pick? And then how you set steps to grow it, and how then do you collaborate, as when you are a stakeholder, university, or when you're a stakeholder as a government or as a private company or as a person, because you even as a person relate to an ecosystem. And then we might even have some time to brainstorm ideas specifically for Albania, but I'm sure tomorrow there will be enough time to work together. And I hope that this will inspire you at least. So first, going to the what. Goal setting, strategy, and structure. And let me kick off with what we call in the Netherlands as the geluksprofessor. This is translated in the happiness professor. So we have this happiness professor who is, providing the insight on why the Dutch ecosystem, or let's say the Dutch economics or nation, is working quite well. And the reason he is arguing is that we are complaining. So the Dutch are constantly complaining about everything. And the good thing about this example or about the complaining is that we then improve. So first we complain and then we improve. And therefore we build from, when you see it from one perspective, a fantastic nation, and the cities are doing relatively well. There is some nuance here because my work is now mainly on, let's say, the other side of the society, more deprived areas, people that are more vulnerable, people that are poor, to educate them, to bring them also in the tech ecosystem. But overall, we do good as a nation. The problem, though, with complaining in a startup or an entrepreneurial ecosystem is that it resonates. It resonates to stakeholders nearby, but also stakeholders internationally. So what happened 5 or 6 years ago when I started working in the ecosystem, our startup founders, our techies, all people related were more or less complaining about the Netherlands and Amsterdam as an ecosystem. They were complaining about the government and the role the government was playing. They were complaining about policies. And let's say the effect of that is that we were not really proud of who we were. So we could not expose how the ecosystem was doing internationally. So then what happened is that all kinds of blogs and all kinds of media was writing about the Netherlands and about our tech ecosystem and what was happening, but it was always with a mixed message. On one hand, some positive elements, and then there were the complaints, because the people being interviewed were complaining. So one of the first things that we did as Startup Amsterdam, we were providing our influencers, our key entrepreneurs, with education on all the positive things in the ecosystem. So we were explaining them and briefing them on the examples where we were, where we had USPs, where we had the stories of entrepreneurs, and the things that we were doing as also the public sector and how everything was working out well. And what happened is that the journalists and the media was more and more started writing positively about the ecosystem. And then the self-confidence grew. And from that, more and more, it's like, you know, this snowball, and it is impacting itself. The nation grew and the city and nation grew in self-esteem when it comes to tech ecosystem. So I'm often asked, what can I do, you know, as a person to help grow the ecosystem or help develop the ecosystem? There are many things, but one of the most important things is to talk proudly of where you're from and to know the examples, you know, share the stories. So this is one of the tasks that you have to embrace as an ecosystem builder. So be super critical inside when you talk with people to improve, but when you go outside, then be proud and share whatever is good coming from, in this case, Tirana, Albania, and so on and so forth. So this is where it all started. And we had the complaint, we had the challenge. So I will bring you now in, why did we start Startup Amsterdam, and what was the key problem? Our key problem was that we lacked scale-ups. So the question actually was, you know, what is the next TomTom or Booking.com? So in a way, we did not take startups as a, let's say, departure point, but more, we needed more scale-ups growing into tech giants. So this was the departure point. Obviously, there were many questions behind that key problem, you know, how to maintain talent, how to increase, you know, the funding capital, all the challenges that, you know, each and every city will have, and each and every country was the same for Amsterdam. I will, in the end of the presentation, tell a bit more on the challenges that we now face as Amsterdam, as a more matured ecosystem, but you will recognize all the challenges. So the second thing that we had to decide was, okay, but what is then our ambition? And we could have picked or decided on many ambitions, but we decided on this key sentence: top 3 tech hub in Europe, together with London and Berlin. So when you read this and read it again, you know, becoming a top 3 tech hub in Europe together with London and Berlin, it's really important first that we said, hey, we don't want to be number 1. It's like, it is not really a competition. It's like something you do together. We will not mention startups. We will, you know, put it on a higher level. We say, hey, we want to become a tech hub. And then we said, we're going to do it together with others instead of, you know, we are in competition. And then we were using other capitals to actually uplift our brand. So this sentence, like top 3 tech hub in Europe, together with London and Berlin, is used in this way for many reasons. So it's framing Amsterdam in the top league together with London and Berlin. It's emphasizing on collaboration, and it's saying that it's not about, you know, the number 1. It's more about Europe as a whole and about collaboration of, you know, strong cities. I also will come back to the role of civil servants here, because Erik Stam was mentioning you can play a role as civil servant in the, let's say, dynamics of a city. But I think, so this is true, but I think it can be go beyond that. And I have some examples to that. And then obviously, you know, when you have, when you feel your ambition and when you know what your key problem is, then you have all kinds of more specific objectives. And, you know, I don't want to go in detail here, but these we were, you know, bringing together. And then obviously we had all kinds of KPIs and OKRs backing them in order to move forward. So this was the departure point. We had the key problem. We had some sort of a ambition statement, and then we had to think how are we going to organize our work? And with this, I will bring you to our deputy mayor, Kajsa Ollongren, who was really important in her leadership in activating Startup Amsterdam, but also organizing all the preconditions that came to Startup Amsterdam. So what she was doing during her first weeks in office, she was biking the city, going from you know, startup founder to tech giant CEO, and figuring out what is the need. And then there was this round table with one of our incubator leads, Patrick de Zeeuw from Startup Bootcamp. And then he was saying to Kajsa, I am sitting at this round table discussing how we can grow our ecosystem. And to be honest, I'm sitting at these round tables for already 2 years, but nothing happens. So this will be my last table ever. The only reason to come back is when you provide us with an action program, a clear and simple and smart action program. And then I will sign in on it, and then we can move together. So that was a challenge that Kajsa took. And then she appointed a civil servant, and she said, I want to have an entrepreneur in residence involved to draft that action program. And then we had to come up with a framework to organize everything that we did. And here you see the 5 key elements, like talent, clients, content, capital, environment. And then we put all kinds of initiatives under the umbrella of the 5 pillars. So what we did is we had this ambition, we knew the key problem, we knew the structure of, you know, where we're going to start all the initiatives. And then we, you know, started to put things really in action. By the way, these 5 pillars are similar in each and every city. Here is an example of what they are doing now in the Ukraine. I was involved, but in Ukraine, they have 3 pillars. You see on top the marketing and communication challenge, then to grow the business environment, which is on top, and then you have talent. And then you see again all these initiatives that have a relation to the things that are being mentioned. When you have a portal, in this case, a Tech Ukraine portal that has impact on marketing and communication, a Startup in Residence program, a tech transfer program, and so on and so forth. So what you see happening in cities and nations around the world is pretty simple. It's like these pillars to impact, and then all kinds of initiatives to have effect on the pillars. I have some other examples here. This is for Bahrain. Objectives: increase the number of startups, increase startup quality, increase early stage funding, and then you see the solutions, and then you're going to run initiatives. So from my perspective, when it comes to ecosystem building, it's to figure out the initiatives needed to really bring the ecosystem to the next phase. I will go more in detail. I will explain and provide you with some examples. But the good news here is that you don't have to think about this anymore because it's being done. All these structures and action-oriented strategies are already in place and are similar. Whether it's Montreal, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Cologne, whether it's Bahrain, whether it's Amsterdam, it's almost everywhere similar. Then a question that each and every startup city or startup nation or tech nation organization has: what is our strategy? And here you see we put a free download actually of our startup city action program, which is free, available for whomever. So Tirana can duplicate or copy paste the entire Startup Amsterdam plan. The 1.0, but also the Startup Amsterdam 2.0 plan is already available on the internet. You can go look at, see it, copy paste it, and use it. And not only use, you can then work together on the initiatives with Amsterdam and other cities that do the same. For Amsterdam, we had a strategy question, and this is like a question as a program, and we decided we have 3 important departure points. First is, whatever we do, we have to empower each and every stakeholder, like the tech events, like the universities, like the co-working spaces, like the incubators. So this was one of the departure points. Everything we do will empower all these stakeholders. The second decision, because we had to choose, are we going into a sector or are we going to go more wide? And we said, okay, we will use the crossovers where Amsterdam is strong. A crossover can be tourism. A crossover can be music. For instance, Spotify already had, was growing into an ecosystem where music was already happening. So you have to define what are the crossovers to use. And what we said, we want to be strong and to showcase Amsterdam as a testbed. When it works in Amsterdam, it works everywhere in Europe. So these were the 3 departure points coming from a strategy. And then obviously here you see it pictured a bit. We did not choose for sectors, although there was a lot of push from all kinds of sectors. We said we go and see it from an entrepreneurial point of view and from a fundamental layer, and we will grow from there. Erik Stam was mentioning that I would provide you with the role. So when you are a government, or when you are a university, or even when you are a person in the ecosystem, then you have, from our perspective, 5 roles. In whatever way, sometimes it's more into the, let's say, the neutral broker, but Startup Amsterdam played 5 roles. We said, first of all, we want to be that neutral broker, connecting people, connecting partners, bridging on policies, but be neutral. Secondly, we activated things that the ecosystem needed. I will provide you with one of the examples, which is the Growth Thrive Academy. There was a collaboration also with the university. So there were things not in place within the ecosystem, and we then put it into the ecosystem. We also said, as a government, as a, let's say, public-private partnership, we said, we as government, we need to be a launching customer or a lead user. And obviously we wanted to be, or we needed to be, the communicator. And there is this role of service provider. So we said, hey, we see these 5 roles happening, and that we have to, in whatever way, organize in the structure. Here you see, the topics. Here you see all kinds of best practices, like visa services, like exchange programs when it comes to the service provider, launching customer, more in startup in residence, So, in each and every initiative, we said, hey, what is the role? From what, role can we put things into action? Again, I will refer to the book and the action program. So there is a free download to the Startup City book where we explained everything, and also free download to the Startup Action program. So you can go more in depth on this after this presentation. And then you see that when it comes to all the initiatives, for instance, Startup in Residence, I will go a bit in detail later, you see all kinds of partners, like the CTO office of the City of Amsterdam. We had all the departments of the City of Amsterdam participating in this government as a launching customer. We had lawyer firms, we had startup incubators, so we had many private partners being partner in this initiative. And I want to mention here, because there was a remark being made about Silicon Valley, about Bay Area, and what is often being said by or in ecosystem that are not that wealthy. They always say, yeah, but Silicon Valley is different from my city. Or yeah, Amsterdam is different from my city because we don't have the finances. When it comes to Startup in Residence, this is an example that we saw 6 years ago happening in San Francisco. It was set up by the City of San Francisco. We read about it in a post, I think it was in TechCrunch. So what I did, I wrote an email to the people from the office of San Francisco. We said, hey, can we fly in? Can we come over and can we have a conversation? We run Startup Amsterdam and we want to actually bring this approach into the City of Amsterdam. And they said, well, you're happy to join and just to see and to learn on how we do it. So we flew with me and a colleague, Dieter, we flew to San Francisco. Then we had this conversation and we said, we want to bring this and implement this in Amsterdam. And we learned that this program was costing literally, let's say, just a bit of spending budget, because, all private partners were involved free of charge. So they were giving back to the city, and all the lawyers and the consultants and all the mentors being involved, they brought in their expertise because they wanted to help the City of San Francisco. They wanted to help the startup ecosystem. So we said, okay, we want to bring this approach and these playbooks to Amsterdam. And then they said, it's okay on one condition is that you will never ever commercialize it, and that you also will share the playbooks and everything that you learn, not only with us, but with cities around the world. So this is one of the initiatives where you see public, private, all stakeholders as an ecosystem collaborating, and you don't need that much of a budget to activate it. It's just passionate people. So what we did, we brought it back to Amsterdam, and then we found within a department of the City of Amsterdam, within the department chief technology officer, we found this civil servant, Minush, and a young, ambitious civil servant. And we said, do you want to run this project? And she said, I want to run this project and I want to grow it. And then we educated her, and she took it not only into Amsterdam, but she took Startup in Residence throughout the Netherlands as a civil servant by doing it herself, together with many others. I just want to wrap this part with just to showcase how our role. So while working on Startup Amsterdam 3.5, 4 years, we were involved in over 40 projects or initiatives in whatever way. We had a team of 30 people, but these people were, in a period of 4 years. What we did, we were recruiting every year new people, educated them, young people. They were, helpful in all the things that we did, and then they were landing in all kinds of parts in the ecosystem. So actually, we grew Startup Amsterdam in the tentacles of the ecosystem. They were young, smart, eager people, and by educating them and having them playing a role and then bringing them into the ecosystem as a whole grew, and the network grew stronger. And we had many partners, being active. And, obviously this is a success story, but a lot of the projects really failed. So I want to share with you, also a few of the ideas we had, like Project A and Project to attract talent from abroad. I think for 50% it failed, but it gave the floor 2 or 3 years later to all the international talent activities of the Startup Amsterdam 2.0 project. So all the learnings we could bring to the second phase. We had an initiative, Study Startup Job, to have students providing with side jobs within startups. That was not that successful. We had a talent that we called Nerderlands, which was in August. That not really, flew into being a global important initiative. So we have many things at the end of the day that did not work. And before I was being appointed, I gave my precondition to Kajsa, our deputy mayor, to be involved. I said, I want to run it as a Startup Amsterdam. So I don't want to be, and a startup means that we will validate. A startup means that we will make mistakes. A validate means that we will learn, and a startup means that we will lose money on projects. So there was a lot of stuff and a lot of initiatives that we activated was super successful. Again, I will explain a bit more detailed later, but many things failed and failed miserably. So within the structure of whatever you're doing in Tirana or whatever you're doing within Albania is organizing it in such a way that you are preconditioned and that things might fail, that you will lose money, but knowingly that on the other hand, a lot of things will take off. So this is a bit like looking back. We had 40 plus projects where we played a role in whatever way, sometimes as the lead of the project, sometimes as a facilitator. We had a team that was distributed throughout the ecosystem year in, year out. And then we had many partners. So I think I want to go a bit more in detail, but there might be questions already, just to make it a bit more interactive.
Any questions popping up, guys? Let me see. Not so much a question here.
Oh, there's one remark from Jacqueline.
Yeah, I see a remark from Jacqueline. Yeah, just as an info, Startup in Residence is also implemented in Albania. So it's powered by the EU for Innovation, yeah. And even though we just started, we totally share the positive experience shared by Ruben. So that's a comment from Jacqueline there. So it is happening in Albania.
Good.
But Erik, it's Jacqueline here. If I may also add another question, Ruben, related to the budget of this Startup Amsterdam program. Can you give us any, let's say, just a rough idea of what budget you had available?
Yeah, sure. So we had, for a period of 4 years, we had 5 million available, 5 million euros. So we had budget to play around with, and we had small bets. Let me give you one example. Together with the university, together with a few private partners, we saw the challenge that we needed more people with growth hacking skills. Growth hacking you can define as data-driven experimentation. So then we said, okay, we will put in 45,000 euros into an initiative to build a curriculum on growth hacking and to provide that to students of the university. So then there was this collaboration between Growth Tribe Consultancy, together with the university. Also Erik was involved, Erik Boer, together with Facebook and some others, and they all put 45,000 euros to build a curriculum and to educate the first cohort of students. I think it were, in those days, 25 students after half a year were being educated. So it took approximately 2 or 3 months to build a curriculum, and then it took 25 people, 3 months to educate the 25 people. 5 years later, it grew into a company, Growth Tribe Academy, They educated over 15,000 people. They are now active in 6 other countries, and they have a client base, like a customer base of 800 clients. So it started really small, and obviously 40,000 euro, 45,000 euro might seem as a high amount. It is obviously a bit of the context in Amsterdam, but it was a leverage that is enormous. So I can, when you go to the budget, there is like many stories on the budget. Let me give you one more question. So it was 5 million in 4 years. So we had to spend on our team, but on all kinds of, let's say, initiatives. Another initiative that grew the ecosystem was what we called, what was named the World Summit AI. So the World Summit AI was is an event, and we met the founders, City AI, together with the Inspired Media. We met them a few years ago, and they were traveling to ecosystems, and with the story, we're going to set up the World Summit AI, which will be the most important and biggest summit on AI. And we want to set it up or in Denmark, in Copenhagen, or in Berlin, but we are here in Amsterdam to relate to the ecosystem. So we said, okay, that is a good, let's say, opportunity. We will connect you with all kinds of ecosystem players, but why not bring it to Amsterdam? And then she said, this was Sarah Porter, the founder. She said, okay, that might be an opportunity, but what budgets do you have available? Because Berlin and Copenhagen do, put budgets into let's say, the negotiations. And then we said we have 0 budget for World Summit AI. However, we have the network, we have experts, and then we build on top of the quality and the network of the university. And obviously, Erik Boer was one of the important persons here to connect Startup Amsterdam and World Summit AI with the AI professors like Max Welling, like Maarten de Rijken. And then we guaranteed that there would be top-notch speakers performing at World Summit AI. We guaranteed that there were enough applicants coming, via the university. We made sure that universities played a role in also activating all kinds of corporates for the Summit AI. So coming back to the question of budget, we had 5 million. So we had, pocket money. We had budgets to experiment. We had budgets also to put into the ecosystem. On the other hand, we were really frugal, and we were validating all parts of the business model per initiative. Does this answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much, Ruben.
Other questions?
There's one more, Ruben, coming just through from Arjan.
Sure.
Let me check. Great insights, thank you very much. But regarding the Tirana context, what kind of piloting can you suggest prior on scaling, and how long it can spread at a national level?
Is the question more specifically like what kinds of initiatives can be duplicated or can be copied or can be used in Tirana and Albania context? Is that, let's say, the question?
Arjan, maybe elaborate on that a little bit. That's it. Yeah, that's what he says. Yeah.
So, first of all, I here now have the slide of Growth Tribe story. So I'm running in let's say, how the presentation goes. So Growth Tribe was pre-COVID-19 focused on mainly offline courses, in-house courses. Due to COVID-19, they were bringing everything remote and now educating people from around the world even wider, and so the content is available. So one of the things that I would, let's say, advise Albania or Tirana is reach out to these people and see, hey, how can we organize that people being educated with the remote courses that are now available? And can you set something? Can you organize something? This is one of the examples. I will come back to with some other, let's say, initiatives that I think can be duplicated immediately. I think the Startup in Residence is another example. I know that, or I was just hearing that it's already active in Albania. The thing is now that the methodology of Startup in Residence, and there is some sort of a platform now being built, is connecting cities around Europe. So the question is here, how can also Albania, not only as a, let's say, individual country, or Tirana as an individual city, be active in a Startup in Residence program, but how can they become a part of this network of cities, so that startups that validate the product in-house or in-country can then also grow city by city internationally. So that is another example. I will give a few other examples, and then I hope that I answer this question as well. All right. Other questions?
Any other questions? Nothing just yet. Ruben, I see coming in. We see my mail.
Let me just and then collect the questions, and I will tell a bit more on how you run startup initiatives. And there is a lot of, let's say, talking about, I just want to emphasize sometimes on things that I hear around the world. They say, hey, how can we collaborate a bit more as an ecosystem? What we also heard here is, we are fragmented. How can we work less fragmented? And from my perspective, there is only one simple answer: is people start collaborating when there are initiatives. It's just when you bring initiatives into the ecosystem, then they will start collaborating. When you discuss collaborating without having anything to collaborate on, it's just, let's say, dead on arrival. I give you an example. We saw that funding was really a problem in Amsterdam back in the days, like funding capital, and then and also knowledge about investment rounds. There was lacking, let's say, the VC network was lacking international network. So what we said, hey, let's set up a week, some sort of an event around this problem. And then we founded the Amsterdam Capital Week. The Amsterdam Capital Week. And again, I was, in the beginning of my presentation, I was referring into building brands. So what is important here? The Amsterdam Capital Week is a brand. So we as Startup Amsterdam, we were not running projects. We were building brands. That is important because at the end of the day, brands people relate to, and it becomes something, that is being embraced. So the Amsterdam Capital Week was being set up. Set up as an experimentation. We said, okay, let's just have 1 week with all kinds of pitch events where we have VCs meeting each other, where we have, things going on. And then we were going around the ecosystem. We said, hey, we have this Amsterdam Capital Week. Do you want to join? And it will cost you nothing. It was just, do you want to play a role and make this happen? What happened is that it was, in a way, a success, but we did not, as Startup Amsterdam, we did not want to, year in, year out, organize it ourselves. So we said, okay, we have a bit of budget, but we now look for entrepreneurs, some social entrepreneurs that really want to bring this startup, this Amsterdam Capital Week to the next phase. So then there were two entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs said, okay, we want to be the organizers. We want to be, let's say, the owners, in a way, of this brand. And they grew it into the next phase. So we, as Startup Amsterdam, we initiated it, we tested it, we validated it, and then we put it into a foundation, and we said, who is willing to take this to the next level? And then they took it, from there with a bit of budget, and now it will, now it's one of the, let's say, important events happening in the ecosystem. So here you see Amsterdam, Startup Amsterdam as an ecosystem builder. It was needed, this kind of event, but also we created something that activated collaboration around something. I think Erik Boer can resonate to that the Amsterdam Capital Week was one of the, let's say, initiatives that also brought the university, ecosystem a bit closer to the outdoor ecosystem, but also vice versa. Erik, can you just relate to that, or do you have an example how you were collaborating in this Amsterdam Capital Week?
Yeah, sure. You're completely right that to get the university to the Amsterdam Capital Week was a great trigger for students to learn more about the world of capital, to take startups on the boat to Angel Island, for example, one of the activities, the Angel Island boat.
Yeah.
And I think it was also helpful for us, probably you come back to that later, to have the Student Investment Fund initiative.
Yeah.
So the connection between venture capital and the university was before that quite low. It was also seen as a little bit of a dirty world, so to speak. I mean, universities and venture capital, they cannot sit in the same room. And bringing them together and having joint activities and learning about each other's world and exchanging experience and knowledge and how it works very much helped in understanding each other's world. So yeah, fully agree.
So thanks so much. And the thing is, one of the things is events in an ecosystem. Like I was mentioning, I'm working, in ecosystem around at least Europe, but also around the world. And one of the countries, obviously, is Ukraine. Ukraine have, for instance, the Lviv IT arena, and you have some sort of an event, an IT tech event in Kiev. So one of the problems with these two events is that it relates to IT. So it's, coming from the past, and it's more offering the IT service companies power and presence than the tech ecosystem or the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So here we were advising to come with, let's say, something new, because the ecosystem needs something that is different or is positioned differently. And also, the government was helping out. For instance, Lviv IT arena and the players, but everyone was seeing that, the event, the first few years was doing really okay, and it was something new, but it did not get the traction that it needed. So when you are an ecosystem builder, when you are playing this role from out, a organization, or you as an individual, it is really important to be critical and sharp towards these kind of people. So we were discussing with the people from Lviv IT arena that they really had to step up their game in order to, be this important stakeholder in the ecosystem. We had events in Amsterdam. One of the events that was, requesting, there was the Uprise. That was the Uprise event. They were requesting budgets for organizing the event, and we said, okay, you will receive a budget when it's being directed a bit more towards talent acquisition, because talent acquisition, hiring and firing, such an important knowledge, but also a topic within the ecosystem. So when you organize your event more around that, then you have a differentiator, and then it will contribute to the ecosystem. And if you're not willing to step up your game, we cannot provide you with support and network, because it will not maintain traction. So bringing this to Erik Stam, Erik Stam said something really important, like, if you don't bring entrepreneurs into the entrepreneurial ecosystem building, it will not work. And that is one thing I can say for sure. Looking at Cologne, it are entrepreneurs that are now stepping in. When you go to Montreal, it's Patrick Gagne, he is an entrepreneur. I myself, it's like when you bring entrepreneurs into the ecosystem building, then you can have also these tough conversations with important stakeholders, because one of the biggest, let's say, barriers for big success for an ecosystem is celebrating the small successes. So what we did in the past is that we were celebrating all kinds of nice initiatives and nice things that happened in the ecosystem in Amsterdam, but nice is sometimes not good enough. It's like you really need game changers. You need to be tough towards one another, and you have to think from out of the business models. So this is one of the, let's say, things that we really put or organize within our ecosystem. Being tough, bringing in entrepreneurs, but also thinking in terms of business models. So here you see all kinds of initiatives that are being, that you can duplicate. This is an example of initiatives within Tech Ukraine. By the way, this is also a collaboration with GIZ, Dutch Base Camp. So coming to the question that was raised, what is the ideal size, from an ecosystem? I think Erik Stam was spot on in answering his question, this question. I think it is a fair question, but what might be a better question is, how can you join an ecosystem? Because an ecosystem, I am more, I see ecosystem from out a global perspective. So I think Erik was mentioning, like some even say it's a global, let's say, perspective, but it is we the ecosystem. When listening to the story of the pyramid and when listening to Uplift, I'm like, I want to relate to that. This is a part of the ecosystem, like the global ecosystem. How can we as Amsterdam relate to Uplift? Relate to the pyramid? How can I, as an individual ecosystem builder, connect dots between Ukraine, Cologne, Montreal, Albania, and between those initiatives or stakeholders or influencers? I think that is an even more important question for yourself to ask, because at the end of the day, you are being part of a larger, let's say, domain. And I think you can even be an ecosystem builder, not for Albania and Tirana, but for, from out of the perspective of wider regions. That might sound a bit holistic. That might sound a bit too abstract, but I believe that, when you think as such, then it will come back. It's not only karma, but the network effect is so strong and the learnings are so strong. And then, ideas start floating, and then you end up with all kinds of hats and all kinds of, let's say, collaborations. This is one of the things that, as an example, that, one of the questions that I wanted to answer as well. So there was this question by the person to say, okay, what can we apply? Look at, these examples, a tech transfer program, a policy and grants association. You see in the best practices, each and every city has some sort of a network, like Innovation Club in Paris, the Munich network. In Amsterdam, we had the Corporate Partner Network. You have these portals like Startup Delta, Tech Leap, Startup Amsterdam. You can duplicate or you can collaborate with each and every of these, let's say, initiatives, and they are happy to. So, and this is, from my perspective, always the answer. It's not that easy. It's just start and take it from there. One of the examples, obviously, is the portal Tech Ukraine. In Amsterdam, with Startup Amsterdam, within 4 weeks after starting our program, we had a portal active. I just want to show you, you have the Tech Ukraine portal. We did the same. So what is important with a portal? Build a brand that is trusted, work on behalf of the ecosystem. Then we say we the ecosystem. And then, public officials together work with an entrepreneur in residence. And I just want to share with you, this is like a portal that is, has everything on one location, about Ukraine, and it's about, the ecosystem map. It's the deal room map being integrated in the, in Ukraine. It's all kinds of showcases where you find the stories of the companies and the incubators and so on and so forth. So obviously this is similar to Amsterdam, and even coming back to Erik Stam, what Erik Stam was saying, when you are a civil servant working for Amsterdam, then it might be that Amsterdam is my let's say, domain of ecosystem building. I think this is true, but there are some exceptions, not so much by people, but Bas Beekman, my companion, said, hey, let's build in unifying the European, let's say, startup cities. Build something like Scale Cities. And then he was setting up Scale Cities, where all kinds of city, let's say, public representatives work together on projects, on insights. They meet during events. So I think it's even going beyond in order to be of impact. So that is a truly entrepreneurial mindset within a civil servant, as an example. Coming back to the portal, I was checking out internet. I could not find any portal. I could find a few, things on Albania, Tirana, but within 4 weeks you can have something present with the stories, with the examples, with the best practices, something that will bring the narrative of Albania, Tirana, and other cities come to life, that will make people proud. And it's just a matter of, let's say, duplicating and using the platforms that can be reused by other cities. Maybe questions on this?
Any questions, guys? Everyone is absorbing, Ruben, information.
Sorry?
I said everyone is absorbing the information. I don't see any.
So. It's like it's pretty late. It's a lot of information, and the only thing what I want to leave you with is as a takeaway, it's just doing the ordinary extremely well. It's just doing the ordinary extremely well. Don't spend too much time into doing the analysis of the ecosystem. Don't spend too much time of thinking of, hey, what should be our unfair advantage? It's a startup in residence, make it work. It's already happening. Then connect it with the Europe-wide startup in residence program that is now being activated. A portal, just put it in place. I just want to quickly go to the startup in residence program. 5 years ago, we went to San Francisco, and today it's happening in cities and in ministries around the Netherlands. You see Groningen, you see The Hague. And there are startup officers being appointed within these ministries, within these cities. And there is this huge dynamic of startups and governmental bodies. We educated civil servants in what is lean startup, what is experimenting, what is data-driven experimentation. So I think it's just doing the ordinary extremely well. One of the let's say approaches that we see abroad is not so much focus on only how to activate more startups, but how can we grow fast-growing companies into real tech giants, or the real, let's say, the business cards of the ecosystem. And you see the Future 50 is a program run in UK, where the future tech giants are in a collaborative setting, in a program, educating themselves, peer learning, but also being mentored by well-known entrepreneurs. In the Netherlands, we have now the Access program run by TechLeap. We have also Scale Up Nation. This might be an approach to adopt as well. Just bring together 5 or 10 fast-growing companies that can be helped or mentored. And this is not an acceleration program. These are scale-ups that really need to go and to, let's say, grow internationally. Build a brand around it. Future 50 is really a brand within the UK. When you are selected, you're one of a kind. So build a brand in such a program. And then another example is the Student Investment Fund. So Erik Boer was already related to that. So what happened is that there was this, I think it was the CEO of the Science Park in Twente. He reached out, he called me, he said, hey, Ruben, we have 2 students in Amsterdam, who are studying in Amsterdam, they learned about the student investment fund in Twente, who want to set up the student investment fund in Amsterdam. Can you help? I said, okay. You know, I was then being responsible for Startup Amsterdam. I never heard about a, you know, student investment fund. So I said, okay, let me just have a conversation with these two students. And then I, you know, sat down with them, and then they were sharing their, let's say, ambitions to set up a fund run by students, and then run by students for a year, and then you have the next board of students. So it's a real investment fund, but also it's a educator, you know, for students. And it's not only a student fund, but also it's a radar for entrepreneurs within universities. But also it is an activator of events within universities on startups, on tech. But also it is a connector between the student ecosystem or the student startup ecosystem and whatever is happening outside. So then I reached out to Erik Boer. I said, Erik, here we have two students. We have this idea. Can you just chat with them? And I, you know, was connecting as a neutral broker with VCs, you know, to have them more insights on what is, you know, venture capital. How do you set up a VC firm? And Erik was helping out in the connections with the university. And it ended up in a VC fund, the Amsterdam Student Investment Fund, that is already active, that has, I think now 4 or 5 student startups in portfolio, one of which actually received half a year ago a Series A by our leading VC firm, Peak Capital, because Peak was being awarded by being the lead VC firm. So, and I learned afterwards that in Montreal, even they do it already for 10 years. So it's like they have a student investment fund with a lot of track record. So coming back to the question of one of the participants, this, you know, the playbooks are in my laptop. The playbooks are available, and, you know, the students of the Amsterdam Student Investment Fund are happy and willingly to share all their learnings with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 eager students from Tirana, somewhere from universities within Albania, to set up a Tirana student investment fund. And obviously it will be most probably with smaller slots, with smaller tickets. It will be a bit different shape within the context, but everything is available. So the question is someone in this call of 40 people sending an email to Erik Boer or myself with, hey, I want to learn more? Or is someone sending an email somewhere on Slack or somewhere in the university channels and say, hey, we've seen this in Amsterdam, we have seen this in Montreal. Are there eager students that want to set something up here in Tirana? And then it will happen. It's just sending that email. So this is the Amsterdam Student Investment Fund. Obviously, I told you the story about the World Summit AI, where you know, the university was key in the first edition of the World Summit AI, and now key of a key player in how we call the AI coalition. It's a nationwide initiative to really grow our ecosystem on the crossover of artificial intelligence. And I think that it all started 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, within the science park with the UvA, in setting up the ECAI model. These are small lab environments where a company is working together with the university in deploying research, but also educating talent on AI. So we found a frugal way to grow, you know, in AI, and now this is coming together. And our university is universities are playing a major role together with our ecosystem, but they are the trailblazer in a way on growing as an AI nation. And again, I know that Erik Boer, myself, we have access to, you know, the AI professors to explain how that ECAI model works. It's just a simple business model. You can learn about it, you can read about it, and then deploy it in Tirana in Albania. So to wrap it up, it is business model driven, whatever you do, don't run projects. It is that startup mindset, experiment, validate, scale. It's having entrepreneurs involved, it's co-creation, everyone is involved, and constantly work from out of building brands. As well, the organization who drives it. This is an approach that, you know, might lift, and then coming back to the question of budget, then what do you need for budget? Not that much. I know 5 million sounds like a lot, but, you know, we had a small team, and we had, you know, the knowledge within our core team on, you know, brainstorming business models, in doing some growth hacking, build some brand, and with these, you know, that small team, we could really play a role in 40 plus initiatives and projects. And, you know, each and every project by itself will create a let's say, mindset, will create collaboration, and will connect the ecosystem with what is happening outside in an ecosystem. So I think we have 8 minutes left. I might have some other slides, but I think this might provide a floor for some more questions.
Thank you very much, Ruben. That was awesome. Let me see if there's anything in the chat or my email just yet. I don't think something coming up. So feel free to send any chats in or interrupt if you have a question.
Can I interrupt in the meantime?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Ruben, well, it's quite delightful, all the presentation you are doing. So this is actually our, let's say, reference point. So this, I guess, all of us, part of this ecosystem in Tirana, want to be, as you are describing. So this is the ideal world for us, and this is a way to go. Right now, because I want to just have a specific question. You said about AI, let's say, initiative. So how do you came out with this idea? So why AI, not I don't know, cybersecurity, not virtual reality or augmented reality? Why this?
You know, after working for 3.5 years, on the fundament of entrepreneurship in Amsterdam and the startup and tech ecosystem, we could then see, okay, what is the next phase? And we saw the emerging tech as a challenge, and we saw that Amsterdam was, you know, laying behind. I remember we traveled to Seattle together with Startup Delta, and we were visiting the AI, let's say, headquarters of Amazon and Microsoft in Seattle. And then we posed the following question. We said, okay, how can Amsterdam or the Netherlands become relevant on AI? You know, we just took that question into, you know, the AI hotspots. And one of the answers, I think, was an answer that resonated, you know, with us, and we built on top of. That was the answer from one of the leading AI experts in Amazon. He said, you know, AI is not so much of a technology question, it's more a user interface question. So he was explaining about it, and then he said, you know, it is a question how to humanize the AI user interface. So how to humanize the AI user interface. There's some sort of background noise, I think. The thing is that he said, you have Dutch design. You have all kinds of people that are creative. So what I would do, I would bring Dutch design to this AI, you know, to humanize the AI user interface challenge, and then you will play a role. You know, at the end of the day, we are, you know, not specifically working on this, but we as a nation, we have this society, I don't know, awareness, and we want to make it work for society as a whole. So now we have AI for, you know, for people, AI for society, and we try to differentiate. We try to not only take it from a technology point of view, but also philosophy, society, you know, and all these aspects. So coming back to your question, I think we build first the fundamental layer, and then you can build on crossovers like AI, like deep tech, like VR, You can see it as a crossover. I hope that answers the question. And obviously,
go to the direct question. So in our case, do we have to go through like a study, a research, or somehow to choose which years, like a specific technology you want to focus for?
I would,
nation, or you just go to Valley and do something there.
Yeah. So my answer would be first go wide, like, you know, build this fundament, build this layer. So ecosystem as a whole, entrepreneurship as a whole, and then afterwards you can see, hey, where is the network effect in place? I give you one example. I was in Copenhagen advising on, and they have this challenge to become a green hub, like, you know, green tech ecosystem. And you know, I said, you know, I see many cities and countries that want to grow as green or sustainable tech hub. The problem is you need density. That's one of the problems when it comes to green. You need density, like the network effect. So make sure that the density is enough or in place in order to really grow something when it comes to, you know, having all the stakeholders in place. But there's one other thing when it comes to, you know, growing in a specific, let's say, sector or domain. My assessment of growing as a green hub has a big challenge because you know, people that are active in green, they are mostly nice people. They care about nature, they care about ecosystem, and that is a good thing. But you know, you also need, as an entrepreneur or as a startup or scale up, to really win, you need, you know, not that nice people. So what I said to the Copenhagen people, so how can you connect, let's say, the ecosystem of sustainable startups and green people, you know, working on green startups, how can you bring them into the, you know, the ecosystem together with the fintech and with all kinds of other tech? Because you need to have not one mindset, you need to have some sort of an integrated approach in order to be successful. Anyway, so I would also, as Albania, first build, you know, the fundament and do the ordinary extremely well. Many examples I've given, and then just see what sectors are dense enough in order